Chapter 3147, 3147 Appreciation. Chapter 3147, 3147 Appreciation. 3147 Appreciation. The outcome of the battle here was already set in stone, but on the other side, there was still a fierce battle raging on. Although Zhao Qi was only 16 or 17 years old, his battle experience was extremely abundant. Moreover, he could release his power, and with the compounding of the 5 overlapping layers of power, his battle prowess was incredibly powerful. Ling Han mainly focused on defense, waiting for an opportunity to counterattack, and his true motive was to wait until Zhao Qi had used up all his power. At that time, it would be him blowing the horn to signal the beginning of his counterattack. Zhao Qi was young and rash, so how could he compare to Ling Han, a veteran who had fought countless battles in the Genesis world? If a 10 meridians went all out, they would only be able to battle for about 2 hours, and with the extravagant use of 5 overlapping layers of power, this had to be further divided into 5. Thus, after half an hour, Zhao Qi's power began to decline. His stamina was astonishing, and his breathing wasn't heavy. However, the mystical power in his body had been expended too much, and even the distance he could release it over had shrunk to about a foot. That's all. Ling Han released a battle cry, and counterattacked with all his might. Peng, peng, peng. He aggressively charged forward. In just 3 punches and 2 kicks, Zhao Qi was sent flying. And this was still because he had not used the demonic monkey fists. Otherwise, he would have long since defeated his opponent. It was necessary to hide one's strength. Whether it was the demonic monkey fists or the brother monkey cultivation technique, they were both too important. Lian Shuarong opened her mouth and said, "Little Qi, come back." Zhao Qi got up and rubbed his chest, showing a pained expression. He obediently walked back, and there was no hatred in the gaze he directed at Ling Han. Instead, it was filled with admiration. Not only him, but even Wang Feng and the others were no exception. Warriors like them had the greatest admiration for those who were truly good at fighting. Ling Han had defeated Zhao Qi, a 10 meridians elite, with his cultivation level of 9 meridians. In their eyes, he was definitely even more astonishing than Sun Jianfang, who had cultivated to the blood transformation tier. After all, if it was in Huju City, although there weren't blood transformation tier elites all over the city, there were still many of them. However, for a 9 meridians to defeat a 10 meridians, there were pitifully few, and they definitely could be ranked in the top 10. Lian Shuarong nodded at Ling Han and said, "Now, I believe that you were the one who killed that python. However, I didn't make a promise with you, that whoever kills this python will have the volcanic fruit." Ling Han frowned upon hearing this. What did this woman mean? I still have an empty position of deputy captain here. Are you willing to work for me? Lian Shuarong spoke up. When these words fell, even Wang Feng and the others were surprised. There were a total of 10 teams under the Shenqing banner, and every team had a captain, followed by a deputy captain. Wang Feng and the elites of 12 meridians were all captains. However, if one wanted to become the deputy captain, they would have to be in 11 meridians, at the very least. Ling Han hadn't even advanced to the 10 meridians yet. Even if he had the ability of a 10 meridians, in the Shenqing banner, he really couldn't be considered an elite. This time, he had been exceptionally promoted. However, Lian Shuarong's rule was extremely strict, so Wang Feng and the others didn't dare to say anything. Meanwhile, He Guan and the others looked jealous. Sun Jianfang had explored for so many years before finally advancing into the blood transformation tier, and he had paid a huge price in this process. Even if his talent was outstanding, and the time he needed to become a blood transformation tier was far less than Sun Jianfang, without anyone to guide him, this time would still be very long. Following the path of their predecessors and walking out a path for themselves were 2 completely different things. Moreover, the Dark North nation seemed to have already walked very far on the path of martial arts. For example, if a Bannerlord was a blood transformation tier elite, then wouldn't the City Lord have to be a level higher, and what cultivation level did the Emperor have? The ancient Dao sect was really too small. The so-called prodigy was only someone like Li Changdan. There was no meaning to stepping on him. Ling Han still wanted to study formations and alchemy. It seemed like this could only be realized if he went to the Dark North Nation. He came to a decision, clasped his hands and said, "Many thanks to Banner Lord for your kind offer." Humph. His attitude incited the displeasure of Wang Feng and the others. When captains like them saw Lian Shuarong, they even had to half kneel down to pay their respects, and you just clasped your hands in greeting? You really think too highly of yourself, don't you? Lian Shuarong didn't care. She ran her fingers through her silky hair. This kind of young man with personality was what she admired more. What was the point of being too accommodating and servile? However, her interest was also to wear down the thorns in these young people's personalities, so that they would listen obediently. "I'll bestow this volcanic fruit on you. Go and retrieve it yourself," she said lazily. Lian Shuarong okayed towards the masses again. "I will give you a month's time to deal with trivial matters. After a month, your forces will come under the territory of the Dark North Nation, and the flag of the Dark North Nation will be planted, worshipping my master as His Majesty." "Understood," Ji Yuanlong and the others replied with a bow. This was a great elite of the blood transformation tier. Aside from Sun Jianfang, who could just barely be considered as an equal, the others could only obey. Another group of people jumped down from the battleship. Each force would be assigned one person, and they would coordinate the process of submitting. After all, submitting to the Dark North Nation wasn't something as simple as just raising a flag. "Old man, let's discuss together," Lian Shuarong said to Sun Jianfang with a smile, appearing very polite. Even in Huju City, a blood transformation tier cultivator could be called an elite cultivator. Moreover, Sun Jianfang had broken through to this cultivation level by himself. There was nothing to be said about his talent and determination. Thus, she gave him a lot of face. If he could survive the loss of life force which resulted in the depletion of his lifespan, perhaps he would have even greater potential for development in the future. Sun Jianfang nodded. She admired Ling Han, which made him feel very pleased. He had no children, and he was already feeling slightly like he was treating Ling Han as his descendant. "Please." He also became polite. The two of them boarded the battleship to discuss martial arts, while He Guan, Ji Yu Tang and the others brought a Shenqing banner warrior back to ancient Dao sect to deal with the specific matters of surrender and submission. "Brother." Wang Feng and the others all gathered around him. It was as if they had seen a monster, and they all stared at Ling Han. It's over, you're really done for." "That's right. There isn't a man that our Banner Lord admires that has come out unscathed. Sigh, you should pray for good fortune." Ling Han laughed in spite of himself. "Banner Lord Lian is that terrifying?" "How could she not be?" a bald man said. "Even though our Banner Lord is so dazzlingly beautiful and charming, she's actually as cold as ice in her bones. She's a demon." In the past, there was a captain who took advantage of the fact that he was a relative of the City Lord, and took advantage of his drunken mood to speak cheekily to the Banner Lord, and guess what happened in the end? His mouth was forcibly smashed, and his lower half had also been sliced off. He ended up being neither male nor female. Ling Han said, "That person probably brought this upon himself. You don't understand. Our Banner Lord Lian is a two-faced person. Right now, she's as cold as a block of ice, but after a few days, she can be as passionate as fire and melt you down. However, if you dare to show even the slightest bit of, hey, you understand. Then, just wait to be taught a lesson," Wang Feng said with lingering fear. Chapter 3148, 3148 Dark North Nation. Chapter 3148, 3148 Dark North Nation. 3148 Dark North Nation. Ling Han looked at these 9 people, and asked, "Have you all suffered like that before?" Sigh. The 12 Meridian's king tiers all sighed. "Who would not times when they had misbehaved?" a large man in green said. It was no wonder that when these people had followed Lian Shuarong off the battleship, they were all as obedient as children. As it turned out, they had all been harshly taught a lesson, leaving behind a strong psychological scar on them. He really couldn't tell that this aloof woman had a side to her that was as beautiful as peach flowers. Additionally, welcome, brother, to join our Shenqing banner. Wang Feng opened his arms to Ling Han and hugged him tightly. The others all stepped forward to embrace Ling Han. They then introduced themselves. These people were actually very simple and sincere, causing Ling Han to slowly change his mindset. Originally, he had hated these people very much. As for Sima Rong, he was in a miserable state. Though Lian Shuarong didn't reprimand him, everyone knew that their banner lord hated being deceived the most. She didn't flare up now because Lian Shuarong held Sun Jianfang in high regard and could not spare the time to punish him now. In the first place, the warriors all looked down on bootlickers like Sima Rong. Naturally, no one wanted to plead on his behalf. They only treated him as empty air, just passing him by, and did not even cast a second look at him. Sima Rong was despondent. He had been assigned a mission when he returned to Blue Feather City this time, acting as a pawn and scout, mainly to find out about the outstanding talents of the various forces. And what happened in the end? There was obviously a super genius like Ling Han, but because of his jealousy, he had almost been buried. How could Lian Shuarong spare him? Flee. He thought to himself that nothing good would happen if he stayed, and he was already a king tier of 10 meridians, so where couldn't he go? However, just as he was about to descend the mountain, he saw the bald man block his path with a grin. Where do you think you're going? This was an elite of 12 meridians. Sima Rong flopped onto the ground. He couldn't run away even if he wanted to, so he could only wait for punishment in fear. Ling Han didn't immediately dive into the pool. The water was still filled with strong poison, and even a 10 meridians demonic beast couldn't withstand it. If he jumped in like this, it was very likely that he wouldn't be able to come out again. It would be better to wait. In any case, the battleship would only be started a month later, and return to Huju City. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Ling Han asked Wang Feng and the others for guidance, and gained a good understanding of the Dark North Nation. The Dark North Nation originated from the extreme north of the Celestial Sea planet. After the drastic changes in heaven and earth, it rapidly rose up, and soon swept aside all opposition, continuously expanding its territory. Why was the ancient Dao sect completely unaware of the existence of such a colossal force? It was very simple, because after the great change of heaven and earth, the wilderness was filled with demonic beasts, and the communication devices were also broken. People could not walk too far, and what they knew and heard was limited. It was only now that the expansion of the Dark North Nation had reached them that they suddenly realized that there was actually such an incomparably powerful force outside. The Emperor of the Dark North Nation was surnamed Chen, but no one knew his name. This was an honorific, and ordinary people were not qualified to know. And what cultivation level the Emperor of the Dark North Nation was at was even more unknown. In any case, he was the number 1 elite of the Dark North Nation, and it was highly possible that he was also the number 1 elite of the Celestial Sea planet. Wang Feng and the others actually didn't know much either. They were only in their 30s now, and had been born and grew up in Huju City. Afterwards, they practiced martial arts, and joined the army in order to get by. Afterwards, after a lot of screening, they finally joined the Shenqing banner. There were about 10,000 people in the ordinary army of Huju City, and the most outstanding people would be chosen to join the special teams of Shenqing, De Huang, Tianhua, and Yunmo. Any one member of these teams would be a king tier of 10 meridians. Their mission was basically to eliminate the demonic beasts within the borders of the nation. This kind of recruitment mission was only done occasionally, and was not much different from a holiday to them. Sun Jianfang soon came out, his face filled with excitement. He called Ling Han over, and seriously advised Ling Han to let go of everything that belonged to the ancient Dao sect. Compared to the greatness of the Dark North Nation, it really wasn't worth mentioning. The old geezer's attitude changed so quickly. Ling Han, on the other hand, didn't care much. He had only entered the ancient Dao sect for a few months, so it was naturally impossible for him to have any sense of belonging. He only thought that Sun Jianfang was worthy of respect, considered Nai Yong a friend and gained a little maid. Previously, he had asked Nai Yong for a favor. When he returned, he would inform Huan Shui that she would come over with the soldier that was heading to the ancient Dao sect. After staying for a few days, the poison in the pool finally dissipated. Ling Han leaped into the pool to see if the volcanic fruit had ripened. The moment he fell into the water, he immediately shivered. It was really cold, almost freezing his blood. He hurriedly channeled the brother monkey cultivation technique. Instantly, a heat circulated in his body, dispelling a portion of the coldness. It was still very cold, but it was finally tolerable. He dived to the bottom of the pool, and the water pressure rapidly increased. Thankfully, the volcanic fruit was growing on the cave wall that was about 30 meters deep in the pool. The water pressure at this position was nothing to Ling Han. It hadn't matured completely yet, and it would probably take another 5 days. Then let's just wait. Ling Han floated to the surface. Voila, water splashed in all directions. He suddenly discovered that even Lian Shuorong was actually at the side of the pool, and this liquid instantly sprayed towards her. Wang, this beauty raised her hand, and instantly, an invisible wall formed around her, blocking the liquid. Apologies, I didn't see Banner Lord, Ling Han said apologetically. Lian Shuorong was not an unreasonable person. She was not angered, but rather threw out a book, and said, "This is a cultivation technique created by His Imperial Majesty, the Xianhuang technique. I will now bestow you with the opportunity to cultivate this technique. If there is anything you do not understand, you can come and find me at any time." Sure enough, proper forces all had cultivation techniques. Otherwise, relying on fist techniques to absorb the mystical power of heaven and earth was really too inefficient. Ling Han accepted the cultivation technique, and Lian Shuorong turned around and left. Sima Rong knelt at the side, so jealous that flames were about to burst from his eyes. He had traveled the world a few years ago, and coincidentally, when he was battling fiercely with a demonic beast, he was rescued by Lian Shuorong's team. He stayed with this team for a period of time, and received some benefits, which allowed him to advance into 10 meridians. Afterwards, he was ordered by Lian Shuorong to return to carry out his mission. However, after so long, he had never been taught any cultivation technique. This damn brat stole everything from him. Sima Rong gritted his teeth. He had been punished to kneel here for a month, but 10 days had not even passed, and he already felt like he could not hold on any longer. If looks could kill, then Ling Han would definitely have been killed by him many times over. Ling Han cast a glance at Sima Rong, but was completely unconcerned. He followed her, and said, "Banner Lord. What is it?" Lian Shuorong stopped in her tracks, a sliver of coldness in their eyes. If Ling Han pushed his luck and made some unreasonable demands, then she would teach Ling Han a good lesson. "Does Banner Lord possess any information about formations?" Ling Han asked. Chapter 3149, 3149 Basics of Formations. Chapter 3149, 3149 Basics of Formations. 3149 Basics of Formations. Yi. Lian Shuorong was astonished. She hadn't imagined that Ling Han would make such a request of her. "What is it? You still want to study formations?" she turned around and asked. Ling Han nodded earnestly, "Amachem." Lian Shuorong shook her head. "Do you know how many cultivators there are in the Dark North Nation?" "No," Ling Han answered very decisively. "Although there are no exact numbers, there should be no less than 100,000 people of 6 meridians and above," Lian Shuorong said. She paused, then asked, "And in the case of formation masters, how many are there?" "I don't know." Ling Han still shook his head. "Not counting apprentices, there are only a mere 100 people that are truly qualified to be called formation masters." Ling Han understood what Lian Shuorong's words meant. That was, formation masters were extremely rare, and there were extremely high requirements to become one. It was not something that could be achieved just by anyone studying formations. However, what she didn't know was that after absorbing all the essence of the divine stone, he was born with outstanding talent in formations and alchemy, and heaven-defying luck and affinity. He merely smiled, "I only want to try and see if I have the talent in this area." Lian Shuorong was slightly displeased. To be so biting off more than one can chew, and be so impractical, how could one possibly walk further on the path of martial arts? "Do you think you are that young Master Wook, who had fluttering white robes and was renowned throughout the world? Capable of easily cultivating both martial arts and formations?" When she thought of that flawlessly perfect man, she couldn't help but blush, her eyes a little dazed. Among all the women in the world, who did not think of him as their dream lover? She hurriedly came back to her senses. She was the banner lord of Xianqing Banner, so how could she lose her composure in front of her subordinates? You wait for a while. Lian Shuarong returned to the battleship, and very soon came out again. She tossed another book to Ling Han. This is a chapter of basics about formations. Take it and comprehend it on your own. Additionally, 3 days later, I will test your grasp of formations. If you can't satisfy me, humph. She waved her hand and left. Ling Han chuckled. All right, then let's take a look at the cultivation technique created by the nation leader of Dark North Nation. He first looked at the Shenhuang technique, and read it word by word. Occasionally, he would let out an "oh." Very quickly, he closed the book, and closed his eyes to recall. It had to be admitted that this nation leader was really a prodigy of martial arts. The prerequisite of that was that this cultivation technique was really created by him. It couldn't compare to Brother Monkey cultivation technique. However, compared to using the 4 directional fists to cultivate, this was still several times better. As for the details, he would only know after trying it out. Early in the morning of the second day, Ling Han used this cultivation technique to cultivate. He discovered that compared with Brother Monkey cultivation technique, this was only 1/10 of the efficiency. Moreover, there were many impurities in the power refined through this technique, and compared with the power in his body, the difference was clear. This cultivation technique could be given to the little handmaiden to cultivate. Ling Han nodded, stopped cultivating this cultivation technique, and began using the Brother Monkey cultivation technique again. According to his estimation, without any special help, he would need around 100 days to be able to step into 10 meridians. This wasn't slow at all, but Ling Han hoped that it could be faster, because he wanted to release the Empress and the others as soon as possible. He believed that this was related to his strength. Once he became stronger, the Empress and the others would naturally be able to come out. Half an hour later, Ling Han took out the basics of formations and began to study it. This was really the basics, starting from explaining what formations were. What were formations? Extracting and turning around the power of heaven and earth to confuse, destroy enemies, and refine pills. Thus, formation masters also had a branch called formation alchemists. They specialized in alchemy, and formations was only supplementary to their main specialization. Aside from the most basic formations such as 3 elements formation and the like, the creation of other formation foundations requires learning formation patterns as well as powerful spiritual power as a medium to communicate with heaven and earth. Spiritual power? In the Genesis world, my divine sense is extremely strong, but now, where do I find spiritual power? In other words, if I want to learn formations, I have to first learn how to strengthen my spiritual power, or how to instill spiritual power into formation patterns. I wonder if there is such a cultivation technique in the Dark North Nation. I'll start learning from the most basic formation patterns first. 3,600 basic formation patterns, 1,800 medium-level formation patterns, 108 high-level formation patterns, and 36 extremely effective formation patterns. However, only 744 basic formation patterns are used here. The combination of different formation patterns can have different effects. I wonder what level the formation patterns on the formation foundations dug out in the ancient Tao sect's ancient formation are. I've already had Huan Shui bring it over. I'll study it when the time comes. He began to learn formation patterns, and instantly fell into a state of neglecting food and rest. He even forgot to eat and sleep, and the most important thing of the morning, cultivation. These formation patterns were incredibly complex. They were obviously only basic formation patterns, but their complexity made Ling Han feel as if he was cultivating an incredibly profound martial arts technique. Moreover, there seemed to be a mystical power in the world that was causing trouble. Every time he memorized a formation pattern, it would immediately begin to fade, as if it was about to be erased from his memory. This caused his progress to become incredibly slow. He couldn't even remember them, so how could he talk about creating formation foundations? Ling Han! Ling Han! Ling Han was interrupted by a fierce knock on the door. He was now on the battleship, and had a single room that belonged to him. He came back to his senses, and suddenly felt both hungry and thirsty. "The Banner Lord wants to see you," the person outside said. Ling Han faltered upon hearing this. Could it be that 3 days had already passed? So fast. No wonder he felt so thirsty. He went out to meet Lian Shuerong. How's the study of the cultivation technique going? Lian Shuerong asked. I've learnt it. Ling Han nodded. Lian Shuerong was drinking tea, and when she heard this, almost spat it out. What kind of joke was this? He had learnt this cultivation technique in 3 days? Keep bragging. All right, I'll test you. She began to test Ling Han, but as questions were thrown out and perfectly answered, she couldn't help but reveal a shocked expression. There really were prodigies in the world. For example, the incomparably talented young Master Wook from the Dark North Nation. It was said that he would be able to learn anything at first glance, and others could only admire him. Was this young man in front of her also such a prodigy? Go on, work hard on cultivation, and don't neglect it, she said. Because she was too stunned, she had forgotten to ask Ling Han how he was doing in formations, but as she saw it, it was already remarkable for Ling Han to be able to fully comprehend this cultivation technique in 3 days, so how could he possibly have the time to spend on formations? Even if she asked, it would be pointless. 2 days later, Ling Han dived into the pool again and plucked the volcanic fruit. This was already completely mature. A volcanic fruit could instantly turn a 9 meridians martial artist into a 10 meridians martial artist. Ling Han couldn't wait. He was filled with longing for 10 meridians. When he released his power, his battle prowess would instantly advance to a new height. It wasn't impossible for him to battle even at 12 meridians. He sat down in a cross-legged position and began to gnaw on the volcanic fruit. It was very fragrant. Though it was not very sweet, it was not too bad, at least. Ling Han made his evaluation, and it was practically in an instant that power surged within his body. Chapter 3150, 10 meridians. Chapter 3150, 10 meridians. 10 meridians. The volcanic fruit's medicinal effects took effect. Ling Han guided the effects, circulating it within his body. Boom. His 9th meridian was rapidly widening at an extremely intense pace. Logically speaking, this volcanic fruit should have been taken when at the peak stage of 9 meridians. In this way, the powerful medicinal effects could be used to open up the next meridian. Otherwise, because this step was the most difficult, it was very likely that as the medicinal effects took effect, the subsequent effects would no longer be enough to open up the 10th meridian. Ling Han didn't care about this. All he wanted was to break through to the peak stage of 9 meridians. Even if the medicinal effects were exhausted, and he was still unable to break through to 10 meridians, he would only have to wait until the next morning to cultivate again. He would definitely be able to push open the doors to the 10 meridians then. He was filled with confidence about this. His 9th meridian was rapidly expanding. This had long since been opened, but it was still far from widening to the extreme. The medicinal effects were so fierce. Ling Han thought internally. At present, it was as if there was a primitive beast hidden in his body that was endlessly barraging him, making him feel as if his body was about to explode. However, the fiercer the medicinal effects, the faster his cultivation level would increase. Under the repeated impact, his 9th meridian quickly expanded to the extreme, giving rise to a powerful pain. It's done, he thought to himself, and began to grope around for the 10th meridian. The power in Ling Han's body was a tentacle, but this power was too violent and not gentle, causing Ling Han to be very injured, coughing up blood continuously. Thankfully, not even a minute had passed, and Ling Han had already found the 10th meridian. Boom, his power had a new vent, and immediately surged in, incredibly violently. Come. Ling Han was as steady as a boulder, absorbing this energy and guiding it towards the 10th meridian. Boom, the 10th meridian was forcibly opened up. This was Hand Yangming large intestine meridian, and it started from the index finger of the left hand, and finally ended below the left eye. It wasn't enough that it had been opened. The medicinal effects of the volcanic fruit hadn't completely dissipated yet, and after several more attempts, it finally came to an end. Ling Han stood up, filled with anticipation. He was now at 10 meridians, and could release his power. With a thought, Power surged in all 10 meridians, converging and fusing, forming some kind of qualitative change that could not be described with words. Ling Han raised his right hand and pressed it forwards. A lamp placed on the table immediately collapsed. Success. Ling Han smiled faintly. However, he didn't dare to use too much strength in the room, so he walked out. There was a combat chamber on the bottom floor of the ship, and there was a strength tester inside. He had long since found out about this. He arrived, only to see 5 men sparring. The youngest was only 20 years old, while the oldest was around 30 years old. They were all 10 meridians. When they saw Ling Han, 2 younger men immediately nodded at Ling Han, and said, "Deputy Captain Ling." The other 3 men were much more arrogant, and acted like they did not see him. Ling Han was suddenly appointed as deputy captain by Lian Shuerong. This naturally made a great many veteran team members displeased. What right did a 9 meridians have to surpass and rule over them? They didn't dare to protest to Lian Shuerong. However, there was no way they would show Ling Han any respect either. In fact, they were filled with animosity toward him. Ling Han smiled and nodded at the 2 people who had greeted him. As for the other 3, he had no plans to pay them any attention for the moment. He only had to show off his abilities, and what problem would not be dealt with. Seeing that Ling Han did not make any move, and merely walked past them, the 3 soldiers with heavy animosity instantly looked disdainful. He was just a coward. He did not even dare to show a temper in the face of such provocation, so how could he be worthy of being their deputy captain? I really am unconvinced. A mere 9 meridians can actually become our deputy captain. It should be known that the lowest requirement for entering into the Shenqing banner is 10 meridians. What kind of bootlicking has this brat done to the banner lord? Hehe, wouldn't you know after challenging him? That's true. If we beat him up, this brat should retreat in the face of difficulties, and ask for his own resignation from the banner lord. Which of our captains didn't obtain their positions with the force of their fists? This guy wants to test his strength. We'll wait for him to finish testing his strength, and then seek him out for a challenge. The 5 of them stopped sparring and walked over. Ling Han arrived in front of the strength tested. He stood 3 feet away from it. Ordinarily, this was the greatest attack range of a 10 meridians king tier. All right, come. He did not channel any kind of technique, and merely shot out a punch. Peng. His fist clearly hadn't landed on the strength testing device, yet the surging power of the punch still surged forward and slammed into it. On the strength tester, the numbers flashed continuously, and finally stopped. Fuck, my eyes must have blurred. How is this possible? Fuck you. On the strength tester, the number 45,500 kilograms was extremely eye-catching. A 10 meridians limit was only 25,000 kilograms of strength, while a 11 meridians limit was also 35,000 kilograms. There were indeed prodigies who could break through this limit, but a 10 meridians highest record was 30,000 kilograms of strength, while an 11 meridians highest record was 40,000 kilograms. 45,500 kilograms of strength. This was almost reaching the limit of 12 meridians. Ling Han must have broken through. Otherwise, he would not have been able to release his power. This was the effect of the volcanic fruit. However, Ling Han should have just broken through, and thus possessed power that was close to the limit of 12 meridians. How could this be believed? Hey, didn't you say you wanted to challenge this new deputy captain? Someone nudged the soldier who had previously said he wanted to challenge Ling Han. The soldier grimaced upon hearing this. How he wished he could dig a hole and bury himself in it. Though he was also a 10 meridians, his power was only 25,000 kilograms. Compared to Ling Han, this gap was close to double. The only result of challenging him would be seeking his own humiliation. It should be known that in front of absolute power, any kind of technique was completely useless. What a monster. A super monster. To say nothing of becoming a deputy captain, it would not be strange for such a monster to become a captain even. The 5 of them were completely impressed. He was already so strong at 10 meridians, then what about when he advanced to 11 meridians? No. As long as he reached the peak stage of 10 meridians, his power would probably exceed 50,000 kilograms of force. Aside from the distance he could release his force, he would not be inferior to any 12 meridians. Ling Han hesitated for a moment. He discovered that the distance of 3 feet was not the limit of his power. He took a few more steps back, and stood 6 feet away, preparing to throw a punch. What does he want to do? Punch from 6 feet away? A 10 meridians power can reach 10 feet at most, but at this distance, the power is almost zero. It's no different from the force of a breeze. What does our new deputy captain want to do? The 5 warriors were all curious. Right at this moment, Ling Han shot out a punch. Peng! The strength tester instantly started operating again. 4 to 46,000 kilograms. Heavens, what is going on here? Not only has his power not weakened, it has instead strengthened. Without channeling any techniques, power will indeed fluctuate, but when a 10 meridians throws a punch from 6 feet away, his power doesn't decrease at all? Am I dreaming? Freak, without a doubt, this guy is a freak. The 5 warriors all looked at Ling Han with reverence. Was this really a human? Chapter 3151, 13 Overlapping Layers of Power. Chapter 3151, 3151 13 Overlapping Layers of Power. 13 Overlapping Layers of Power. Ling Han thought for a moment, then took a few steps back. When he was 3 meters away, he then threw another punch. Peng! The strength tester vibrated slightly, and still showed a figure exceeding 45,000 kilograms. On the sidelines, those 5 soldiers were already rendered speechless. Why was it that after one had advanced into 10 meridians, the hierarchy would become extremely clear? It was very simple. A 12 meridians could strike their opponent from a distance of 6 meters away, but a 10 meridians only had an attack range of 3 feet. To say nothing of the fact that there was a power gap in the first place, even if there wasn't, with such a far distance, a 10 meridians wouldn't even have the chance to make a move, and would be directly blasted to the ground. This new deputy captain was definitely not human. In the future, no matter what he said, they had to listen obediently. They definitely could not just obey on the surface but disregard him on the side just because his cultivation level was not high. Ling Han retreated again, and after a few more attempts, he finally found out his limits. When he was about 6 meters away, his power would begin to decline. When he was about 6 meters and 1 foot away, his power would be practically zero. In other words, whether it was in terms of power, or the distance he could release his power, he was not inferior to a 12 meridians. Awesome. Ling Han was brimming with confidence. Right now, even if he had to battle against 12 meridians elites like Meng Ruining and the other 12 meridians elites of the older generation, he would be unafraid and there was a 90% chance of winning. He turned around, and saw that the 5 warriors from before were all gaping widely, looking at him as if they had seen a ghost. Ling Han smiled faintly at them before turning around to leave. Fuck, I'm about to go crazy. Such a powerful 10 meridians elite is practically a monster. No, I want to be transferred to Captain Ling's team. I'll apply too. The eyes of these 5 people lit up. If they followed an elite, they would also be able to benefit from it in future, especially when Ling Han was presently in a weak position. If they followed Ling Han, they would be Ling Han's loyal subjects, veteran brothers, and veteran subordinate. Putting them aside, after returning to his own private room, Ling Han began to study compounding overlapping layers of power. The 4 directional fists also had overlapping power, but from the 3 moves that Sun Jianfang had taught him, it could only overlap 2 layers of power, which barely counted. However, among the fist techniques of Brother Monkey Fist Technique, the highest power overlap could reach 180 layers. This was terrifying. With a single punch, it was equivalent to having 180 Ling Han's attack at the same time. How many people could withstand it? Ling Han believed that if he really reached such a profound cultivation level, he would be able to crush a blood transformation tier elite into dust with a single punch. Let's give it a try, and see just how many overlapping layers of power I can reach. Ling Han thought internally. Those 180 overlapping layers of power were only theoretically the maximum value. There was an extremely high requirement for the cultivator himself. The first requirement was comprehension. Ling Han did not lack this, but he also needed his physique to keep up, and his power to keep up. Otherwise, if he shot out a punch of 180 overlapping layers of power, his body would first explode, or his strength would be completely unable to keep up, and he would not be able to hold up after shooting out a few dozen overlapping layers of power. This way. No, it should be this way. That's not right either. Ling Han very quickly left his private room. He disembarked from the battleship, and found an empty spot to practice in a dense forest. Demonic monkey fists was extremely important, so it was best not to let outsiders know. He practiced over and over again. If he wanted to use overlapping layers of power, he would have to allow the power in his body to quickly be spat out. There was practically no interval, and only then would he be able to unleash more than a single overlapping layer of power with a single strike. The faster the speed at which he spat out power, the more layers there would be overlapping. Ling Han controlled his power and didn't unleash his full power. Otherwise, the power in his body wouldn't be able to withstand such extravagant use. Moreover, if it really came down to a random barrage, this dense forest would also be destroyed by him. At present, the power he could release had reached about 6 meters, and there was absolutely no need for him to draw close at all. The force of over 45,000 kilograms would already be crushing down on his opponent. This was too terrifying. Peng. He had already cultivated to the point of forgetting everything. All of a sudden, a rock exploded, waking him up from the state of practicing fist techniques. Hey! I clearly only used 1,500 kilograms of strength in this punch. Logically speaking, it should be impossible for me to shatter a rock. Unless I've cultivated the power of overlap. Ling Han was pleasantly surprised. He carefully recalled the scene just now, then his arms slowly moved. He suddenly threw a punch. Peng, another rock was shattered by him. As expected. Ling Han broke into a smile. He had grasped the power of overlap. 2 overlapping layers of power. Taking the first step was the most difficult. Next, it would be the problem of overlapping more layers of power, which would completely depend on the rate at which power surged. Ling Han started to practice again. 3 layers, 4 layers, 5 layers, 9 overlapping layers of power. Ling Han soon reached his current limit. 9 overlapping layers of power superimposed, and then his surge of power couldn't keep up any longer. My body doesn't feel any pressure, and my meridians don't feel any pressure either. This means that it is only my power that can't keep up, but my body hasn't reached its limit. Let's try channeling the brother monkey cultivation technique again. Ling Han channeled the brother monkey cultivation technique before launching another punch. As expected, the speed at which his power surged had increased considerably. It can still be improved. 10th layer, 11th layer, 12th layer, 13th layer. Ling Han had once again reached his limit, and could not improve any further. Furthermore, brother monkey cultivation technique can only be channeled for about a minute. Once I surpass this limit, my meridians will be greatly suppressed, as I will feel as if they're about to explode. Thus, under normal circumstances, the overlap of my power would be 9 layers, and under a burst of explosive power, it would be 13 layers. For example, Wang Feng and the others can only attack with 5 overlapping layers of power. Even if I don't explode, 9 overlapping layers of power will still be enough to suppress them. However, there's no benefit in being too high profile. I'll hide my strength, it's fine as long as I can win. He, who kept a low profile, was actually very proud. Just look, against an elite of 12 meridians, his prerequisite was still winning. I'll ask that Banner Lord Lian if she has any cultivation technique to increase spiritual power. I should start practicing formations. Ling Han went to look for Lian Shuarong again. Have you advanced into 10 meridians? Lian Shuarong allowed him to enter into her boudoir. Even though this was a battleship, her room was not plain and simple in the slightest. She had everything a woman should have, and even had a dressing table. TSK, this cold-faced woman knew how to dress herself up. Ling Han mocked internally, while replying, yes. If one couldn't advance from the 9 meridians to the 10 meridians after ingesting the volcanic fruit, then one could only say that they were too weak. Lian Shuarong didn't find it strange either. She knocked on the table and said, 5 people applied to be transferred to your team. She paused and said with a faint smile, what spell did you put them under? She knew that her appointment of Ling Han as deputy captain had actually made many people dissatisfied, especially some veteran soldiers. They had all been in Shenqing Banner for 7 to 8 years, but they were still just ordinary soldiers. A young brat who previously only had 9 meridians was suddenly promoted to deputy captain, so how could they be satisfied? But now, there were actually 5 people who actively wanted to follow Ling Han, and 3 of them were veteran soldiers. This made her feel curious. Ling Han cracked a smile and said, I have always used virtue to convince others. Perhaps, when they saw my noble character, they admired me from the depths of their hearts, and that was why they chose to follow me. Just keep talking nonsense. Lian Shuarong rolled her eyes. Chapter 3152, 3152 Divine Intent Disc. Chapter 3152, 3152 Divine Intent Disc. 3152 Divine Intent Disc. Lian Shuarong didn't spend much effort on this matter. This matter was insignificant, and she was only curious for a while. What business do you have with me that you seek an audience with me? She asked coldly. Oh. Ling Han nodded. I would like to ask the Bannerlord if there is any cultivation technique that cultivates spiritual power. What do you want this kind of cultivation technique for? Lian Shuarong revealed a curious expression. Isn't this cultivating formations, which requires spiritual power? Ling Han said. You've actually learnt it. Ling Shuarong was truly shocked this time. She had initially thought that Ling Han was biting off more than he could chew, and after studying it for a while, he would give up on it. Yet Ling Han actually asked her for the cultivation technique of spiritual power, which also meant that he really wanted to learn formations. Hiss, you freak. She shook her head. There are pitifully few cultivation techniques of spiritual power. They are all grasped in the hands of the formation masters, and would definitely not be taught to outsiders. In other words, unless he became the disciple of these people, it was definitely impossible for him to be taught such a technique. Ling Han couldn't help but feel gloomy. He didn't want to acknowledge anyone as master. Furthermore, there are pitifully few people who can cultivate spiritual power. Lian Shuarong continued, this requires natural talent. If 1 in 10 people can walk on the path of martial arts, then there may not be 1 in 10,000 who can cultivate spiritual power, and only those who have cultivated spiritual power can take the path of formations. She glanced at Ling Han, changed the topic, and said, however, if you really want to give it a try, there's a way. Hold on. She began to rummage through her belongings, searching for something. At first, Ling Han wasn't very concerned, but when he occasionally looked at Lian Shuarong, he suddenly felt heat rise up within him. Fuck, this seductive beauty was actually looking for something with her behind raised. The leather cloth tightly wrapped around that shapely bottom, making one burn with heat. Ling Han hurriedly turned his head, murmuring strange inwardly. What kind of temperament did he have? How could he lose his cool so easily? Could it be that as his cultivation level had been weakened, his self-control had also decreased? After a while, Lian Shuarong finally found what she was looking for. She walked over and threw a disc at Ling Han. It was made of metal, and when it hit the table, a crisp peng sound was heard. This is a tool used by a formation master to select disciples, and is called the Divine Intent Disc. Lian Shuarong explained, those who have natural talent in this area can use this item to cultivate a shred of spiritual power. Ling Han gave an O, and picked up the disc to take a look. It was as thin as a mirror. One side was smooth, and the other side was like a labyrinth, covered with veined patterns. When his eyes focused on it, after a while, he would discover that these veined patterns were actually moving. I would advise you not to bite off more than you can chew. Although being a formation master is extremely rare and has a high status, attaining that requires natural talent, and it is not something that can be achieved just through your hard work, Lian Shuarong said seriously. I understand. Ling Han nodded. Lian Shuarong waved her hand dismissively, indicating that Ling Han could leave now. She only had to look at the expression on his face when he answered, and she knew that this guy had not taken her words to heart at all. Forget it. In a few days, when he hit a wall, he would naturally know that martial arts was the only way for him. Just look at the current emperor. His cultivation was exceptional, and his dominance was unmatched in the world. Did he need to cultivate formations as well as a foil for himself? Ling Han brought the disc back with him, and began looking at it. Lian Shuarong didn't say what to do specifically, but rather simply staring at it would do. Ling Han stared at it. Those dense veined patterns seemed to have a life of their own, and were twisting slightly. Was this a visual side effect caused by staring at it for too long? Ling Han thought internally, but when he channeled the mystical power in his body into his eyes, he still discovered that those veined patterns were moving. No, it's really moving. There should be a small formation set up inside this disc. As he watched, he felt like something in his body had been stimulated, but he could not put his finger on exactly what it was. Yee! He shockingly discovered that a small white dot had appeared on the circular disc at some point in time. He stretched out his hand to touch it, yet discovered that it was out of reach. He retracted his hand, and the white dot was still there. This was. An enlightenment came upon Ling Han. Should he use spiritual power to touch it? He tried to push it, but the white dot did not move at all. His determination firmed. Ling Han's interest was piqued. He had a very bad temper, and the more difficult problems he encountered, the more motivated he became. I don't believe that I can't move you. Ling Han tried to use his spiritual power to stimulate this white dot. In the Genesis world, his spiritual power was undoubtedly the number one in the world. Despite now that it had disappeared with the decrease in his own cultivation level, compared to ordinary people, he still knew how to mobilize his spiritual power. However, perhaps he didn't have any spiritual power now, or perhaps his spiritual power was too weak. The white dot didn't move at all. Once Ling Han's temper flared up, he couldn't care about anything else. Aside from eating and drinking, and the fact that he had to cultivate for half an hour every day, he simply held on to this disc, as if it was his lover. He did not just stay in his room. Sometimes, he would also sit at the bow of the ship, or at the side of the pool. As time passed, rumors spread. Hey, do you guys know? The new deputy captain has a crush on the Banner Lord. Isn't that very normal? Our Banner Lord is so beautiful, and her figure is so voluptuous. Who wouldn't like her? This is different. That guy is holding on to the divine intent disc that Banner Lord has given him, and is daydreaming all day. Fuck, such deep yearning to the point of being engraved to the bones. He's treating the divine intent disc as the Banner Lord. Sigh, what a pitiful guy. He actually fell in love with our Banner Lord. He would be destined to be alone for his whole life. All the warriors thought that Ling Han was madly infatuated with Lian Shuarong, and that was why he had deliberately asked Lian Shuarong for a token, to look at it and think of her. Wang Feng and the others all ran over to comfort Ling Han. They all patted Ling Han's shoulder, looking at him like he needed to pull himself together. There were plenty of fish in the sea, so why did he have to hang on to this one that had spikes? This would cause himself be pierced through with many bloody holes on his entire body. How could Ling Han be in the mood to pay attention to them? He merely held on to the disc, and was filled with such determination in his heart, and the reason being that he was set on pushing this white dot forwards. Wang Feng and the others all shook their heads. Damn, his guy was already so deeply entrenched in Sh*T and could not be pulled out. Sigh, brother, take care of yourself. Several more days passed, and those who had returned to deal with the trivial matters of the sects all returned. With these mighty figures personally dealing with it, the matter of surrendering naturally went very smoothly. Young master. The little female attendant was also brought over. When she saw Ling Han at the bow of the ship, she couldn't help but feel delighted. But what was wrong with young master? He was hugging a strange disc, as if it was some kind of treasure, and was completely ignoring her. Hey, are you this guy's female attendant? Wang Feng asked. That's right. Chapter 3153 Cultivating Spiritual Power. Chapter 3153 Cultivating Spiritual Power. 3153 Cultivating Spiritual Power. Young master is so pitiful. Quan Shui supported her chin with both hands and looked at Ling Han in a daze. Sigh, who would have thought that Brother Ling is such a capricious person, to actually go so crazy for love. Please allow me to sing a song in his honor, a tall, thin man said. He was one of the 10 captains, Fu Xiong. Oh, my love, he began to sing, which also caused those around him to cover their ears. This guy was clearly tone deaf, yet still had a good opinion of himself. He kept thinking that everyone would not appreciate him, and when he had the chance, he would use his singing voice to brainwash them, so that others would accept the fact that he was the god of songs. What are all of you doing here? Lian Shuarong walked onto the deck, a hint of displeasure on her pretty face. This was too outrageous. They were all warriors after all. Everyone hurriedly dispersed, and even the god of song fled in disarray. Ling Shuarong was even referred to as a cold-faced witch by them in private, so who wasn't afraid? Set off, and return to the empire, Lian Shuarong said coldly. She glanced at Ling Han, and when she saw that he was still hugging that disc, she couldn't help but shake her head. This guy was really too obsessed, wasn't he? Forget it. When he returned to Huju City, she would give him a good training, then for sure he would not have the time to daydream. The warship shuddered, and had already taken flight. Although the warship was very big, and could accommodate a great many people, Lian Shuarong didn't bring many back with her. Only the younger generation of various sects and factions. Poepel such as He Guan and the older generation were left behind in their original forces. She was not interested in them at all. A 10 meridians in his 70s was really too old. Even if he had cultivated to 12 meridians, so what? Could he still fight? Mystical power would indeed become denser and denser as one's cultivation level deepened, but physical power was the complete opposite. After 70, it would decline, and after 100, a serious deficiency would appear in physical power. Unless one was like Sun Jianfang, who could actually rely on his own trial and error to step into the blood transformation tier. That was a true prodigy. He Guan and the others were naturally displeased, but what could they do? Could it be that they could force Lian Shuarong? That would really be courting death. The warship headed north. The Dark North Nation was located in the extreme north of the Celestial Sea planet. However, Huju City was located in the southernmost part of the Dark North Nation, and it had only been established for 20+ years. With the warship's speed, the journey would only take about half a month. In truth, the warship's speed was not very fast, but its advantage was that it could ignore all obstacles and travel non-stop day and night. Ling Han was still the same as before. Every day, he would hold on to the disc, and it was as if eating and sleeping had become his instinct. When it was time, he would eat something, and then lay down to sleep, not caring about anything else. Sigh, how deeply in love. Wang Feng sighed ruefully. I want to sing a song again, Fu Xiong said. When they heard this, everyone hurriedly ran away. Young master, Quan Shui was so anxious that she was almost tearing up. The heaven and earth had changed, and large amounts of wild beasts had evolved into demonic beasts. Not only were there demonic beasts on the ground, but there were also demonic beasts in the skies. There were also behemoths with wings that reached dozens of meters in length, or even over 100 meters in length. On their way, they encountered a few. Thankfully, with the light cannons on board, these demonic beasts did not dare to provoke them. 16 days later, a large black city appeared on the ground ahead of them. There were no tall city walls, and this city was open on all sides, with no boundaries. Hiss, how domineering. We're home. Wang Feng and the others all smiled. Their parents, wives, and children were all here. The warship landed somewhere in the city. Boom. The ship shuddered violently. Ling Han suddenly came to his senses. He discovered that the white dot had moved. Was it an illusion? Or a misplaced vision caused by a shock? Ling Han picked up the disc again, and stared at the white dot. He thought to himself, move upwards. What surprised him was that this white dot had really moved upwards a little. Success, he had managed to cultivate spiritual power. A smile appeared on Ling Han's face, and he breathed a long sigh of relief inwardly. He felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. Without proof, no matter how confident he was, he still felt a little uneasy. Right until this moment, when it was proven that he had really cultivated spiritual power, he naturally became relieved. A strong feeling of weariness assaulted him. Peng, Linghan fell asleep facing the sky. On the way here, he had only slept for 3 hours a day, and under such accumulation of weariness, he was naturally extremely sleepy. When Linghan woke up, he discovered that he was already lying on the bed, and this was no longer the warship, but rather a decent bedroom. That's right, he had cultivated spiritual power. Linghan immediately got up and channeled his spiritual power. In this place, it was also called spiritual power. Yi. The moment this spiritual power was being channeled, he realized that it was as if he had an additional pair of eyes, and could actually see what was behind him. No, in all directions, and there was no dead end. This was the effect of spiritual power, it was really too practical. Would anyone still be able to sneak attack him in the future? However, this required him to actively channel spiritual power, and spiritual power was the same as the mystical power in his body. There would come a time when it would be exhausted. If he continued to cultivate and strengthen his spiritual power, he would naturally be able to channel it for a longer period of time. Naturally, Linghan used spiritual power to observe himself. He wanted to see his meridians. When spiritual power was shifted onto himself, boom, it was as if he had entered into a new world. This was a dimension that had been nurtured from the countless cells in his body. He was like an immortal, and could see all the mountains and rivers on every dimension, every blade of grass and every tree, man and beast. The Empress, Hu Niu, his parents, son, and daughter. A gratified expression appeared on Linghan's face. He had finally seen his family again. Though they had only been apart for a few months this time, which was far from the time that he had gone into seclusion before, he was still filled with excitement. The flow of time in the two worlds was different. 1 year here was equivalent to 1,000 epochs in the Genesis world. However, with a sweep of his spiritual power, Linghan felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. Only 100 or so days had passed in the dimensions inside his body. Was this because he had been born from the divine stone and fused with the world here, so the dimensions in his body had also synchronized in time? That ought to be the case. Linghan wanted to communicate with the Empress and the others, but discovered that he could only see, as if he was a soul that had no physical body. Though his spiritual power had swept over them repeatedly, the Empress and the others did not react at all. It looked like this was because his spiritual power was too weak. This was equivalent to giving him a calming pill. As long as his spiritual power became slightly stronger, he would be able to communicate with the Empress and the others, and if he was even stronger, he might be able to release them. Good. This was really very good. Young master, you're awake? The little female attendant appeared, her face filled with pleasant surprise. Linghan got up, and seeing that he was very hungry, he asked, "Is there anything to eat?" "Yes, yes, yes." Huan Shui hurriedly nodded. "Young master, you slept for 3 days and 3 nights. You scared Huan Shui to death." She patted her chest with all her might, as if she wasn't afraid of her chest being flattened at all. He had slept for so long. It looked like he had overdrawn his body greatly. Linghan got off the bed. The living room was right outside the bedroom. It was very small area. Huan Shui brought over dishes and rice, and Linghan began to eat. After filling his stomach, Linghan asked, "Where's my disc?" "Ah, I don't know," Huan Shui said, her gaze flickering. Linghan's expression became serious. "Young master." Huan Shui was instantly scared pale, and she said, "Just forget about the Banner Lord Lian. Big Brother Wang and the others already said that Banner Lord Lian definitely won't fall in love with anyone. You're just digging your own grave and hurting yourself." What was going on here? Chapter 3154, 3154 There's a formations shop. Chapter 3154, 3154 There's a formations shop. 3154 There's a formations shop. Linghan's mouth twitched slightly. Who in the world told this little girl that he had fallen in love with Lian Shuarong? Where do you keep getting these crazy ideas? He shook his head. That is the divine intent disc. It's used to cultivate one's spiritual power. Ah. Only now did Huan Shui realize that she had made a mistake. She couldn't help but blush, feeling very embarrassed. She took out the divine intent disc from the drawer and handed it over to Ling Han. In the end, she did not dare to throw it away. Ling Han shook his head with a smile. After taking the divine intent disc, he began to push that white dot again. With his spiritual power, the white dot moved. However, the veined patterns were like a wall, and thus the white dot could only move within the grooves. This was a labyrinth. Ling Han stimulated the white dot, and very soon, he encountered a dead end. Then, he retreated and found a new path. After a while, he felt mentally weary, and could not continue. Practicing over and over again like this, one's spiritual power would be slowly strengthened. Ling Han nodded. So that was the case. With my rate of advancement, is it considered fast or slow? Because his spiritual power had already been exhausted, and there didn't seem to be any way to recover it quickly, Ling Han went to study formations instead. He grasped more and more basic formation patterns, and believed that he could already lay out some simple formation patterns. Let's take a look around the city. He did not bring his little female attendant with him, but rather walked around the city by himself. Huju City was much larger than the ancient Dao sect. The architectural styles here were diverse. There were ancient stone and wood buildings, as well as high-rise buildings made of steel and concrete. There's a formations shop. Ling Han stopped at the entrance of a shop. The words "there's a formations shop" were written on it. A very unique name. Ling Han thought for a moment, then walked into the shop. This shop wasn't big, and Ling Han was able to walk straight in. Moreover, it was only a single-story building. Compared to the high-rise buildings in the surroundings, it seemed very out of place. There was an old man sitting lifelessly in the shop. He was resting with his eyes closed. Even though he clearly heard someone enter, he didn't open his eyes to greet the customers. Just like the name of this store, the old man had a lot of personality. Ling Han looked around. Every set of formations was placed in a glass display case. There was only the name of the formations and a brief description, as well as the price. The staff in this shop was very lazy, so lazy that he would rather write down all the information than speak to others. The formation techniques are really expensive. Ling Han was dumbfounded. Even the cheapest set of formation techniques would cost 10,000 Dark North coins. Dark North coin was the currency issued by the nation. Outside of the Dark North nation, this currency was useless. However, in the Dark North nation, no matter what kind of transaction it would have to be paid in Dark North coins. Otherwise, there would be severe punishment. And the Dark North coin was linked to the jade seed. One jade seed could be exchanged for 100 coins. In other words, the cheapest formation was equivalent to 100 jade seeds. This was very, very expensive. For example, Wang Feng and the others only received a monthly allowance of 5,000 coins. Moreover, this was only because they were captains of the Shenqing banner. For normal solidars, they would only receive a monthly allowance of 800 coins. "Old man, are there any formations for sale?" Ling Han asked. The old man opened his eyes, his expression filled with impatience. "Brat, is there something wrong with your eyes or your brain? Isn't it written very clearly already? TSK, he could actually do business like this." Ling Han chuckled and said, "Uncle, you've misunderstood. I don't want to buy completed formations, but the diagram of formations that I could set up." The old man revealed an astounded expression. He raised his head and surveyed Ling Han carefully. "Brat, you want to learn formations?" "That's right." Ling Han nodded. The old man laughed loudly. "If you were the disciple of some formation master, you naturally would not have to find formations to examine. That must mean you are studying formations on your own. You have cultivated spiritual power?" Ling Han chuckled and didn't reply. In the entire Dark North nation, there weren't many people who had cultivated spiritual power, so it was best for him to hide his strength for a while. The old man cast a second look at Ling Han, then took out a book from a drawer behind him, and tossed it over to Ling Han. "Take it." "How much?" Ling Han asked. "I'll give it to you." The old man waved his hand. "It's just an old book." It's not worth much. Ling Han gave an "oh" and said, "Then thank you, uncle." He stuffed the book into his robes. It was really very thin. "If you've mastered formations, you can bring them to our store for consignment, and we'll collect a 10% fee for the sale," the elder said. Ling Han smiled, "All right." He turned to leave. After a while, another person walked in, his expression appearing very respectful. "Greetings, Uncle Nyo." This was an old man that looked to be in his 60s, but he was hale and hearty in spirit. He was dressed in long robes, and had the air of nobility about him. The old man in the shop immediately closed his eyes, and acted as if he had not seen anything. He was putting on airs. The old man who had just arrived was called Jiu Tianhe, and he was the chairperson of Huju City's Formations Association. Due to the unique nature of formations, his status was extremely high. Even if the city lord came, he would have to be polite in front of him. Hence, if outsiders saw this scene, they would definitely be so shocked that their eyes would pop out. What was going on here? Someone actually dared to put on airs in front of chairperson Jiu? Jiu Tianhe smiled bitterly. Who asked this old man to be his senior? And one with a terrible temper at that. He continued, "It's almost time for the formations competition that is held once every 3 years. The branch needs to select a person to go to the imperial capital. Tianhe would like to ask Uncle if there is anyone that he would like to recommend." Actually, as the chairperson of the Formations Association that ruled over the city, it was entirely up to him to decide who he would send to the imperial capital to participate next year. However, this Uncle Nyo of all people was his senior. He had to come and ask for instructions, even if it was just for show. "Get out. Don't come and bother me." Uncle Nyo waved his hand, looking completely annoyed by the other person. Jiu Tianhe could only turn around and leave. This was not outside of his expectations. He only felt that it was a pity. In the past, Nyo Huiqing had been so full of vigor, but now? Life was ever-changing. Ling Han walked around again. There were alchemical pills, formations, conventional weapons, firearms, and so on and so forth being sold here. Conventional weapons were mainly prized for their sharpness and sturdiness, while firearms were limited to normal caliber guns. This was actually not much of a deterrent to cultivators above 6 meridians. However, there were actually talisman weapons sold here. This was expensive, and it was not just any ordinary price. In fact, it was not something that could be sold just because you had the funds. One also had to have a corresponding status. At present, Ling Han was a savage. Of course, he could not buy firearms or even cold weapons. He observed them from behind the counter, and discovered that the descriptions for these talisman weapons weren't written with ink or other materials. Instead, they were written with blood. Strange. He thought for a moment, but still decided to go back and fiddle with the formations. Ling Han returned to his residence, and began to flip through the book on formations. Chapter 3155, 3155 Taking Down a Notch. Chapter 3155, 3155 Taking Down a Notch. 3155 Taking Down a Notch. This was a psychedelic formation, and it was extremely simple. It could only target meridian opening tier elites, and if one had attained the blood transformation tier, they would be able to influence the power of heaven and earth with a single punch, thereby breaking through the formation. Formations were used to stimulate and change the great power of heaven and earth. This would require 36 basic formation patterns to be inscribed on the 9 formation foundations. When inscribing formation patterns, one would also need to instill spiritual power into the formation patterns. Otherwise, those would only be dead patterns. I'll try it out with ordinary wood first. Ling Han had already learnt these 36 formation patterns, but because all the formation patterns would slowly disappear in his mind, he first studied the corresponding formation patterns carefully before inscribing them. Then, he stimulated his spiritual power and began to carve on the wood. 1, 2, 3. After drawing 9 formation patterns, the spiritual power that he had recovered with great difficulty was once again exhausted, and he could only stop to rest. At night, a soldier came over and informed Ling Han that he would report to the base of Shenqing Banner tomorrow morning. Ling Han pondered for a moment and decided to take a good rest. The next day, Shenqing Banner's base, Team 7. The 8 team members all looked towards the entrance of the camp, as if they were anticipating someone to come. Today, the new deputy captain is coming. Hihi, I really want to see how handsome this guy is, to actually be able to enchant even our banner lord. We definitely have to take him down a notch, and make him retreat in the face of difficulties. Without true strength, to say nothing of being our captain, he wouldn't even be qualified to join Shenqing Banner. That's right. A sturdy man of about 35 or 36 years old nodded. Little Zhong, later, you go and challenge this deputy captain. All right. A young man who looked to be in his 20s nodded, while the others crossed their arms over their chests. They were sure that Zhong Honglang would be enough to deal with him. At this time, a young man appeared at the entrance to the base camp. It was Ling Han. Is it that brat? Probably. I've never seen him before, and he fits the description as well. He looks to be in his late teens. All right, let's wait for him to come. The members of Team 7 were all rubbing their fists, waiting for Ling Han to come over. The camp of Shenqing Banner was very large. Though there were only about 100 people in the whole camp, and even with the support staff, there would not be more than 200, this camp took up about 10 acres of land. Because this was outside the city, they could choose any empty land. Ling Han strode forwards, heading towards where Team 7 was. There was absolutely no need to worry that he would not be able to find the location, because there was a flag erected where every team was located. On it were the words First Unit, Second Unit and so on. So you are Ling Han? 8 men of varying ages approached. Ling Han swept an eye over them and said calmly, if I'm not wrong, you guys are members of Team 7, and if I remember correctly, I just happen to be your deputy captain. He paused, then continued, is this how you guys greet the deputy captain? Hihi, if you want to be our deputy captain, you have to first obtain our approval. Otherwise, you would only be nothing in front of us, a sturdy man in his 30s said. That's right, the deputy captain should be our brother Liu instead, the youngest young man, Zhong Honglang, said. This brother Liu was called Liu Jing, and his cultivation level was 11 meridians. He had been in Team 7 for close to 10 years, and was extremely experienced. Furthermore, he was a very loyal person, so he had naturally gained the support of the other team members. Oh, so you guys are going to take me down a notch? Ling Han asked with a smile. This isn't called taking you down a notch. We only want to spar with the deputy captain, Liu Jing said with a smile. He was extremely dissatisfied. Their former deputy captain had been killed in the beast suppression mission not too long ago, so he was naturally very upset about it. However, in terms of seniority, he should be the deputy captain, and not this young man that had popped out from who knows where. Ling Han took a look. The captain of Team 7 was Tang Hai, whom he had known since long ago at Sealed Mountains, but now, Tang Hai had not appeared. What did this mean? The other party must have known that his subordinates would target Ling Han, yet deliberately avoided revealing it. It was obvious that he wanted Ling Han to solve this problem himself. There was only one way to win the respect of these warriors' strength. Thus, even if Tang Hai appeared and helped Ling Han resolve this rebellion, these people would stop causing trouble now, but what about in the future? Would they submit to Ling Han? Ling Han smiled faintly. Since that was the case, then let's battle. Who's going to attack first? He asked as he looked at the 8 people. Me. Zhong Honglang called out. Since I'm the deputy captain, I'll let you have the advantage of one hand. Ling Han clasped his right hand behind his back. Zhong Honglang was instantly enraged, and shouted loudly, I don't need you to give me an advantage. Hihi, make your move. Ling Han crooked a finger at his opponent with his left hand. Zhong Honglang hesitated for a moment before resolutely saying, you asked for this. Peng, with a stamp of his feet, he charged towards Ling Han. He was at 10 meridians. Before he drew near, his attack had already arrived. It turned into a crescent blade that charged towards Ling Han. Ling Han shot out a fist, greeting the other's attack. Peng, the power of the blows clashed, instantly forming a shockwave that spread out in all directions. In this exchange, the two of them were evenly matched. Yi, this brat can actually fight little Zhong to a tie. He's not as weak as the rumors say. However, Little Zhong hasn't used overlap yet. Once he uses it, that brat would definitely be no match. He came from a remote village, after all. Tang Hai and the others had all said it. They definitely did not believe that Ling Han could defeat Zhong Honglang. Even just a tie was definitely impossible. Zhong Honglang's attacks were extremely fierce. He used both fists and kicks, and every move was a technique to kill. This was very normal. If soldiers did not cultivate the art of killing, what was the point of cultivating? Ling Han casually responded. Since they would all be his soldiers in future, he decided to go easy on him, so that he would not lose too badly. The two of them were just embroiled in a lively battle when they suddenly heard a commotion coming from the entrance of the camp. There were also a great many people running towards that direction. What had happened? Little Zhong, stop first, Liu Jing said. Zhong Honglang stopped as he said. He turned around and asked, Brother Liu, what is it? Something seems to have happened. Liu Jing waved his hand, let's go and take a look. Voila, in an instant, all 8 of them ran towards the entrance of the camp. What was this? Ling Han stroked his chin. This was a little awkward. He was just left out like this. He also strolled towards the entrance of the camp. He had just arrived there, when he saw a figure fall down from the skies. The figure just happened to land at his feet. Ha 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 ha, Shenqing banner is really led by a woman, nothing but a bunch of spineless be-at-starred. A voice rang out, instantly causing the dozens of soldiers at the entrance of the camp to all look furious. Chapter 3156, 3156 Provoked by the Yunmor banner. Chapter 3156, 3156 Provoked by the Yunmor banner. 3156 Provoked by the Yunmor banner. Surrounded by the crowd was a young man who looked to be only in his 20s. He was dressed in a tight-fitting black suit, completely outlining his slender yet well-built figure. A little bit behind him, there were 2 brawny men standing with their arms crossed over their chests. They were shirtless, and their arms were so thick that they could be compared to thighs. Judging by the color of their clothes, these 3 people were clearly different from the others. They were all dressed in black. These were the soldiers of Yunmor banner. Ling Han had previously found out that there were a total of 4 elite troops in the Huju city, and they were Shenqing banner, Dehuang banner, Tianhuang banner, and Yunmor banner. These 4 troops were on the same side, and there was also competition among themselves. By the looks of it, Shenqing banner was the weakest of the 4 troops, whether it was in terms of overall strength or individual elites. It could not be helped. The Shenqing banner had only been established in the last 15 years, so in terms of background, it naturally could not compare to the other 3 teams. Furthermore, because the banner lord of the Shenqing banner was the only woman, in this world of martial arts where a man would have a greater advantage, they would naturally be viewed differently. The 4 teams frequently challenged each other, and the one who was provoked the most was naturally Shenqing banner. There was no other reason. They were too weak. And now, Yunmor banner had come to challenge them again. The young man looked disdainfully at the surroundings, his eyes looking down on everyone. Is there anyone who can fight? Haha, within 10 meridians, I can give you an advantage one hand, and even if it is in 11 meridians, it is not impossible for me to fight them. How arrogant, someone from the Shenqing banner said through gritted teeth. Who will go up and deal with him? Sigh, it can't be helped. His Zhu Lang, and although he can't be ranked in the top 10 among the younger generation, he can at least be ranked in the top 20. This kind of person would be the top prodigy of a city, and has a chance of entering the imperial capital in the future. But how could it be that we would just stand by and watch him act audaciously? The people of Shenqing banner were all incredibly furious, but this kind of challenge was also very particular. A 10 meridians naturally should be fighting against a 10 meridians, and an 11 meridians should be placed against another 11 meridians. And now, a 10 meridians had come from the Yunmor banner. If Shenqing banner had to mobilize an 11 meridians or 12 meridians to deal with him, then there would be no need for them to exist in the future. Moreover, Zhu Lang was indeed very powerful. No 11 meridians dared to say that they could firmly suppress him. If even an 11 meridians was defeated by him, then the whole Shenqing banner would lose face. Weak, truly weak. Zhu Lang shook his head, and said, The way I see it, there's no need for the Shenqing banner to exist at all. Huju City only needs 3 banners. This mockery was enough to drive anyone crazy. Zhu Lang, let me battle you. A young man jumped out and charged towards Zhu Lang. Zhu Lang sneered, and merely shot out a palm strike. Peng, that young man was sent flying. Like a scarecrow, he flew out of the crowd, and landed heavily on the ground, coughing up blood continuously. Too weak, he said coldly. However, at least you still dare to attack. You're not a coward, so cowardly that you don't even have B at LLS. B at starred. Another young man rushed out, but Zhu Lang merely shot out a kick. There was clearly still 3 meters between them, but the force of the kick had already reached him, and sent him flying. He had unleashed his power 3 meters without any weakening of force. This was the standard of 11 meridians. No wonder this person was so arrogant. He was a 10 meridians who possessed the battle prowess of the peak stage of 11 meridians, so it did indeed qualify him to be as arrogant as this. If a 12 meridians didn't appear, who could compete with him? Group battle? Then Shenqing banner would never be able to raise their heads high again. There's no need to fight such trash. Zhu Lang shook his head, his expression filled with disdain. In the huge Shenqing banner, aren't there any that can fight? Ha ha ha. The 2 brawny men from Yunmore banner behind him laughed loudly, similarly filled with disdain. Everyone was extremely furious. A few more young people jumped out to accept the challenge, but they were all sent flying with a single move. Among the 10 meridians, there was really no one that could match Zhu Lang. Zhong Honglang moved, wanting to charge out. He really couldn't bear it any longer. Even if he was defeated, he would still fight. However, he had just raised his foot, when he felt a heavy weight on his shoulder. A hand pressed down on him, preventing him from taking the second step. He turned around to take a look. Wasn't this their cheap deputy captain? You're no match for him, Ling Han said calmly. Zhong Honglang raised a brow. So what if he wasn't a match? How could it be that he would choose not to fight just because of that? You coward, not only did you not dare to make a move, you did not even allow him to make a move either. You are definitely a coward. Coward, don't stop me, Zhong Honglang roared. However, no matter how much he struggled, he couldn't move a single inch. If he thought about this question carefully, he would definitely look shocked, but now that his anger had gone to his head, how could he still calm down to consider the problem? Hearing this, the Shenqing banner warriors in the surroundings all glared angrily at Ling Han, their eyes filled with disdain. What did they hate the most in the army? Cowards. It was inevitable that they would encounter incredibly powerful enemies. How could it be that they would retreat without a fight? No, what was needed at this time and of the highest priority was to help one another and unite, but the moment someone became a deserter, they would be done for. It was very possible that the whole team would be defeated in an instant. Hence, one after another, the young people rushed forwards fearlessly, knowing that they would definitely lose, and no one stepped forwards to stop them. This was for the sake of their pride, and for the sake of their glory. Wasn't this guy the deputy captain that had been newly promoted by the Bannerlord? Was such a coward even worthy? Just get lost. Ha ha ha. Zhu Lang laughed loudly, and looked towards Ling Han and Zhong Honglang. This is the smart move, but this also allowed me to see clearly that the Shenqing banner are only cowards. The soldiers of the Shenqing banner were all howling in fury. This practically drove them mad with fury. To them, their glory was their life, and was more important than their lives. At this moment, their disdain for Ling Han was far greater than their hatred for Zhu Lang. Ling Han sighed. Why were these people so rash? He shook his head and said, I'm your captain, so it's not your turn to fight yet. With a light wave of his hand, Zhong Honglang involuntarily retreated. Teng, 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 he crashed backwards into the crowd. Ling Han strode toward Zhu Lang. Ha ha, coward, you've been embarrassed by others, so you had no choice but to run out? Zhu Lang sneered. What I hate the most are cowards and spineless be-at-stards. Against people like you, I won't send you flying with a single strike. Instead, I'll slowly deal with you. Ling Han smiled calmly. You speak too much nonsense. He shot forward like an arrow, then threw a heavy punch. Boom. He didn't use any techniques, and he just threw a simple punch. You're overestimating yourself. Zhu Lang sneered, and also threw a punch back at Ling Han. Peng. The two of them could release their power, and when there was a distance of 9 meters between them, the power collided. Then, Zhu Lang's expression changed drastically. It was as if the power he shot out had encountered a dam, and could not advance the slightest bit. Then, the dam turned into a boundless wave that surged towards him. Then, he was sent flying. Just like those who had been sent flying by his strikes previously, he was sent flying out of the crowd. Then, he fell heavily onto the ground, coughing up blood continuously. Fuck. Chapter 3157, 3157 Counterattack. Chapter 3157, 3157 Counterattack. 3157 Counterattack. Everyone was dumbfounded. What was going on here? Zhu Lang was actually sent flying with a single move. Though this guy was a 10 meridians, his battle prowess was completely comparable to an 11 meridians, even a peak stage 11 meridians. Who could believe this? They all looked towards Ling Han. This young man looked to be a few years younger than even Zhu Lang, but his battle prowess was so strong that he practically looked like a monster. Good one, Captain Ling. Good fight. There was a scattered cheer. These were the 5 people who had witnessed Ling Han's terrifying power on the warship. Previously, they had not dared to shout, fearing that they would be beaten to death by their companions, but now that Ling Han had sent Zhu Lang flying, they naturally had no more reservations. It was a shame that they hadn't been able to transfer to Ling Han's team. Otherwise, they would have been even more proud. Zhong Honglang's expression was filled with shock. For a moment, he couldn't wrap his head around it. Wasn't this deputy captain locked in a fierce battle with him? How could he manage to send Zhu Lang flying with a single punch? What was going on? This was incomprehensible. Idiot, the deputy captain was lenient towards you at that time. A member of Team 7 lightly smacked the back of Zhong Honglang's head. Only now did Zhong Honglang come to his senses. When he looked at Ling Han again, his eyes were filled with deep respect. His abilities were clearly far superior, but for the sake of his pride, he actually deliberately tied with him. TSK, what an exceptional captain. Ling Han smiled faintly, and withdrew his fist. You speak so boldly, yet the result is that you are not the slightest bit durable. The entire Shenqing banner fell silent for a short while, then suddenly erupted in a thunderous roar. This was too satisfying. This new deputy captain was too awesome. Great, just beat him to near death. Who asked him to be condescending and arrogant? The other 2 soldiers from Yunmore banner also started to panic. What was going on? A 12 Meridians elite had made a move. They immediately said, how shameless, using an elite of 12 Meridians to suppress him. An unjust victory would only be more humiliating. They didn't believe that a 10 Meridians or 11 Meridians could defeat Zhu Lang with a single strike. Even the prodigies ranked in the top 10 in the city couldn't do it. Yes, perhaps the monster in the first place could, but it definitely couldn't be the person in front of them. Ling Han appeared calm and unruffled. You can eat whatever you like, but you can't speak irresponsibly. He charged out. Peng, peng, 2 punches landed, and the 2 sturdy men were also sent flying. With his full power channeling, every meridian in his body emitted a faint glow, a total of 10 of them. His cultivation level of 10 meridians was clear at a glance. The members of Shenqing banner all became excited. Some roared at the sky, some raised their weapons high and brandished them repeatedly, while others danced around in joy. On the other side, Zhu Lang finally got back to his feet slowly. Although he had been sent flying, he hadn't suffered any serious injuries. It was just that he couldn't think straight for the moment, so he continued to lie on the ground. How had he lost? Who are you? He asked. Shenqing banner, the deputy captain of Team 7, Ling Han said calmly. Deputy captain? That would have to be an 11 meridians, at least. In fact, in some teams, it wouldn't be strange for a 12 meridians to be the deputy captain. And to be able to send him flying with a single punch, that definitely had to be the power of 12 meridians. Fuck. A 12 meridians was bullying him with his advantage of a higher cultivation level. He was defiant. Your Shenqing banner is really too shameless. You actually sent a 12 meridians to sneak attack me, Zhu Lang said through gritted teeth. Pu. Everyone's expressions were filled with disdain, giving Zhu Lang a merciless mockery. 12 meridians. Just now, Ling Han had already publicly announced that he was a 10 meridians, just a 10 meridians. If he couldn't win, he couldn't win, but he still had so many excuses. He really was a sore loser. Zhu Lang couldn't help but find it strange. What's with your expressions? You're clearly using an elite of 12 meridians to suppress me, but why am I the one who looks like an idiot? Ling Han! Ling Han! Ling Han! The people of Shenqing Banner all shouted loudly. In this moment, they had completely accepted this deputy captain. Hence, it was really very simple to win respect, as long as one had enough strength. Ling Han looked around, and asked, "Where is the base of Yunmore Banner?" Everyone was startled. What did Ling Han mean by asking this question? Someone who had quick reflexes immediately came to his senses, and said, "Deputy Captain, are you planning to challenge Yunmore Banner?" Of course. Reciprocity requires reciprocation. How could they be the only ones to cause trouble? Ling Han said calmly, "I'll take you there. I'll bring you there too. I'm going too." All of a sudden, everyone was excited, as if they had been pumped full of adrenaline. All this while, it was the three great banners that had come to cause trouble, while Shenqing Banner was forced to accept the challenge. Most of the time, they had to swallow the bitter fruit of defeat, and allow their opponent to humiliate them as they liked. It could not be helped. There really was no elite-level prodigy to turn the tide. Now that Ling Han said he was going to launch a counterattack at Yunmore Banner, it naturally ignited the emotions that had been suppressed in everyone's hearts. Everyone raised their arms and called out, wanting to work alongside Ling Han. Meanwhile, Liu Jing sighed inwardly. It was only an instant, and the members of Team 7 had all become Ling Han's loyal supporters. His position as deputy captain was already firm and unshakable. It had to be said that even he had been impressed by Ling Han. Following such a young, promising, and heroic deputy captain should be very enjoyable. Charge! Everyone was shouting, as if they weren't going to Yunmore Banner to challenge them, but going to war. Ling Han led the way, and almost all of Shenqing Banner's troops were mobilized. Over 80 people surrounded Ling Han, as if he was Shenqing Banner's banner lord. Really, aside from Lian Shuarong, what other captain would have such prestige? Where should we go? Ling Han had just walked out of the base camp when he stopped and asked the person behind him. This question almost caused everyone to fall to the ground. Fuck. Right now, everyone's mood is hot as fire. However, your sudden question is far too demoralizing, no? However, hearing this, everyone laughed out loud. This deputy captain seemed to have a natural talent for jokes. "Let's walk to the left first," someone said as they led the way. Ling Han continued to lead the way, and the others followed behind him. Behind them, Zhu Lang and the other two men from Yunmore Banner also followed. They were still a little dazed. What had gotten into these people from Shenqing Banner today that they would actually dare to be so insolent at the base of their Yunmore Banner? The encampments of the 4 banners were distributed in the 4 corners of the city. Thus, no matter which part of the city was in turmoil, there would always be an elite troop that could move out quickly to suppress the unrest. Thus, there was still some distance from here to Yunmore Banner. After walking for about an hour, Yunmore Banner's army camp was finally within sight. They discovered the camp, and the people in the camp also discovered them. Of course, there were sentry posts here. Otherwise, if they encountered the barrage of attacks from demonic beasts, wouldn't they die without even knowing that they were going to die? Instantly, the camp sounded the alarm. Fuck, a dark mass of people surged over. This lineup was really too big, wasn't it? In a short while, a large group of people rushed out of the camp's entrance. Chapter 3158, 3158 Challenging Yunmore Banner. Chapter 3158, 3158 Challenging Yunmore Banner. 3158 Challenging Yunmore Banner. Xianqing banner, what do you guys want? In the camp, someone shouted and asked. Although Xianqing banner was the weakest of the 4 banners, they weren't much weaker either. Once a huge battle broke out, the consequences would be unimaginable. Even if Yunmore banner won, it was inevitable that they would be severely punished. Those in a higher position were most afraid of chaos in the army. Could it be that the Xianqing banner, no longer able to bear the humiliation, had finally exploded? We have come to issue a challenge. Just Yunmore banner are allowed to issue a challenge, and we can't do the same. Challenge. The members of Xianqing banner all shouted in excitement. This was something that had never happened before, and it made their blood boil with excitement. The people of Yunmore banner all exchanged looks. A challenge? Have you all taken the wrong medicine today? Right at this moment, Zhu Lang and the others walked over. Captain, Xianqing banner has gone too far. They mobilized a 12 meridians and beat up Xiao Lang, a sturdy man immediately said. We protested for a while, and they beat us up as well, the other sturdy man said. Zhu Lang, on the other hand, remained silent. In this way, the entire Yunmore banner was in an uproar. Fuck, your Xianqing banner is really too shameless, isn't it? How shameless. Brothers, grab your weapons, let's do it. The people of Yunmore banner all shouted, raising their weapons high. Ling Han stepped out bravely. If things continued to develop, it would become a gang fight. I was the one who defeated Zhu Lang. He raised his voice. Hey! The people of Yunmore banner all looked at Ling Han in shock. This was the 12 meridians. But he was too young, wasn't he? By the looks of it, he was not yet 20 years old. Indeed, if it was a battle of a 12 meridians against a 10 meridians, that would be bullying, but if both of them were around the same age, that would be another matter. It is your cultivation speed that is too slow, so you can't blame others, right? I am a 10 meridians, Ling Han said seriously. He said calmly, however, I don't mind who you send. Whether it is 10 meridians, 11 meridians, or 12 meridians, I will accept them all. He channeled his power, and the 10 meridians that had already been opened in his body immediately emitted a faint light. It really was a 10 meridians. The people of Yunmore banner were both shocked and curious. They all turned their eyes to Zhu Lang. Was this really the person who had defeated him? Meanwhile, Zhu Lang's jaw dropped. He couldn't believe this at all. Ling Han was really a 10 meridians. Fuck, he had been defeated by a 10 meridians. How was this possible? His natural talent in cultivation was enough to be ranked in the top 20 in the whole city. There were only a limited number of people that could defeat him, and at present, there were even fewer that were 10 meridians like him. To say the least, even if those few people moved, it was definitely impossible that they would be able to defeat him with a single punch. This was completely one-sided. Seeing that Zhu Lang did not speak, the people of Yunmore banner naturally could not confirm either. Let me fight you, a 10 meridians martial artist jumped out. It was impossible that no one would accept a challenge when an opponent was calling out right at their doors. He charged towards Ling Han, but before he could even throw a punch, he was sent flying with a slap from Ling Han. He couldn't even withstand a single blow. Fuck. So powerful. The people of Yunmore banner all thought internally. To defeat a cultivator of the same cultivation level with a single strike, he was definitely on the level of a prodigy. Even among those noble families in the city, he could at least be ranked in the top 20. When did the Xianqing banner recruit such a prodigy? Good one. Xianqing banner's soldiers roared. Some of them almost screamed their throats out. They had been waiting for this moment for too long. Next, Ling Han said calmly. This kind of careless, relaxed attitude caused Yunmore banner to burn with fury, while Xianqing banner was filled with high spirits. I'll go. Another 10 meridians cultivator leaped out and charged at Ling Han. However, he would only be delivering himself up to be defeated. Next. Ling Han didn't say anything extravagant, and his expression was extremely calm. However, it was this kind of uncaring display that caused the people of Yunmore banner to feel greatly humiliated. In Ling Han's eyes, could they be considered a match at all? You are really too condescending. Ah. A person rushed out with a roar, yet was easily sent flying with a palm strike from Ling Han. He would again deal with the next one with a single palm strike. After a consecutive 7 people, Zhu Lang finally stepped out, faced the people of Yunmore Banner and said, 10 meridians and even 11 meridians can't possibly be a match for him, because I was defeated by him in a single move. He really didn't want to see his comrades being defeated one after another, so he revealed the scandal of him being instantly defeated by Ling Han in front of everyone. What? Had Zhu Lang really been defeated by this young man? 10 meridians against 10 meridians, instantly defeated with a single move? The people of Yunmore Banner all fell silent. Even Zhu Lang had been defeated, so who in the same cultivation level could be a match for Ling Han? Ling Han's eyes swept over them, necks. But this time, no one else from Yunmore Banner came out to fight. Those who are 12 meridians, come out. Ling Han crooked a finger at them. I don't mind. The people of Yunmore Banner remained silent for a while longer. Only then did a man in his 30s walk out. There was a long scar at the corner of his lips, and his hair was disheveled, looking like he was a maniac. Luo Ziyuan. He pointed at himself, I will only use 10 moves. If you can block them, then it would be considered that our Yunmore Banner has lost today. Captain Luo. The people of Yunmore Banner all exclaimed in shock. Luo Ziyuan glanced at everyone. You guys don't believe me? Everyone stopped talking. This Luo Ziyuan was known as Yunmore Banner's #1 god of war, and among 12 meridians, he could be considered one of the top elites. If Luo Ziyuan was also unable to defeat Ling Han, then unless the Banner Lord was dispatched, there would be no one in the entire army that could be a match for Ling Han. The problem was, if it was only limited to 10 moves, wasn't that too little? Luo Ziyuan strode out. His figure was really tall, about 7 feet tall. He was so sturdy that he was at least as wide as 3 Ling Hans. The moment he walked out, his figure instantly cast a long shadow. The difference in size was too obvious. In front of him, Ling Han looked like a child. 10 moves. Luo Ziyuan said solemnly, I won't bully you either. The fact that a 12 meridians was fighting a 10 meridians was already bullying them to the point that they could be no more bullied than that. However, who asked that there was really no one under the 12 meridians that could restrain Ling Han? Ling Han smiled calmly, whatever. Luo Ziyuan took a deep breath. Pu, pu, pu. All the veins in his body pulsated, releasing a powerful sound. It was as if there was a monster hidden in his body that was about to break out of his body. His hands actually turned crimson red, with steam rising from them. Crimson Flame Palm. Captain Luo has used his strongest move. This is a secret technique that Captain Luo obtained from an ancient site. Its might is boundless. No wonder Captain Luo said the limit of 10 moves. This is actually no different from 100 or 1,000 moves. The people of Yunmore Banner were all excited. That godlike strongest captain of theirs was about to show his might. Ling Han smiled faintly. This crimson flame palm might be very powerful, but it was obvious that Luo Ziyuan wasn't able to unleash its full might. Otherwise, there should be flames entwined around his hands, and not just heat. Charge! Luo Ziyuan roared as he charged over. Chapter 3159 Protecting Her Own People. Chapter 3159 Protecting Her Own People. 3159 Protecting Her Own People. Luo Ziyuan's physique was astonishing, and as he charged forward, it was as if a massive beast was barreling towards him. Merely this aura alone was enough to scare a great many people to death. Scram! He roared loudly. Clapping his palms together, he delivered a palm strike at Ling Han. Boom! Endless power rolled out, turning into a powerful gust of wind. This attack was a little strong. Ling Han used the 4 directional fists to greet his opponent. Peng! In an exchange of blows, Ling Han's figure instantly slid back, while Luo Ziyuan stood proudly like a mountain. Ling Han took 3 steps back, then 2 steps back. Then, he took another 20+ steps back. This brawny man had attained the 6th layer in terms of power overlap. Ling Han was surprised. Up until now, this was the person with the most layers of power overlapping that he had seen. 4 directional fists couldn't win. Ling Han thought internally. 4 directional fists could only stack 2 overlapping layers of power, and his raw power was not as strong as Luo Ziyuan's. Thus, if he used the 4 directional fists against his opponent, he would be at a complete disadvantage. He didn't want to expose the demonic monkey fists, but he wasn't one to accept defeat. He clearly could win, so why should he lose on purpose? Let's do it. Good one, Captain Luo. Seeing that Luo Ziyuan had gained the upper hand with a single strike, the people from Yunmo banner all shouted loudly, cheering him on. One of the people from the Xianqing banner mocked, "It's just a matter of a 12 meridians bullying a 10 meridians. What is there to be so proud of?" The two sides were embroiled in a war of words, and Luo Ziyuan also launched another attack, racing towards Ling Han. Ling Han charged forward nimbly, actively parrying the attack. The demonic monkey fists was used, and he superimposed 7 overlapping layers of power. Peng, 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 peng. He clashed with Luo Ziyuan. It was clearly just a single blow, yet it was as if they had exchanged 6 to 7 blows in an instant, with sharp sounds ringing out endlessly. Ling Han was sent backwards, but Luo Ziyuan was also sent backwards. Everyone was instantly confused. Who exactly was on the upper hand? Of course, only the two people involved knew best. Luo Ziyuan's expression was filled with seriousness. He was a peak stage 12 meridians, and his power was as high as 50,000 kilograms. Ling Han was naturally no match for him, and there was a gap of about a few thousand kilograms between them. The problem was that Ling Han's layers of power overlap had surpassed his. Thus, in the previous 6 waves of clashes, he had gained the upper hand, but he had not thought that Ling Han would actually be able to fire out the 7th layer of power overlap, which instantly caused him to retreat continuously. Hiss, 7 overlapping layers of power. An expression of shock appeared on his face. It should be known that it was also because he had accidentally obtained the secret technique, Crimson Flame Palm, that he had been able to use 6 overlapping layers of power. This already made him practically invincible among the 4 banners. But now, a person had appeared, and in terms of compounding layers of power, he had actually surpassed him. Could he defeat his opponent within 10 moves? Difficult as ascending the heavens. Ling Han released a battle cry, and took the initiative to attack. He had never been the type to take a beating passively. Peng, peng, peng. He and Luo Ziyuan battled fiercely, and in practically the blink of an eye, the two of them had already exchanged 10 moves. However, Ling Han had no intention of stopping. Luo Ziyuan naturally couldn't stand there and take a beating. Thus, the two of them were still fighting very fiercely. Was 7 overlapping layers of power still not enough to deal with it? Ling Han shouted lightly, and overlapped his power to the 8th layer. Instantly, it was clear that he had the upper hand. Ling Han had to deal with his opponent as soon as possible. Meridian opening tier elites could only attack with their full strength for 2 hours. Even if his meridians were wider, and he could store more mystical power, with 8 times acceleration of expenditure, he would only be able to last for just over 20 minutes. Thus, he had to deal with Luo Ziyuan as soon as possible. Ling Han burst out again. If 8 overlapping layers of power were still unable to achieve a quick victory, then he would use 9 overlapping layers of power. This burst of power from an additional overlapping layer of power was equivalent to having an additional 12 meridians attacking him. This was definitely no joke. Boom. This kind of burst of power was not something that Luo Ziyuan could match. He just barely managed to last over a dozen moves, before he was struck by Ling Han's punch. He stumbled back more than a dozen steps, a trace of blood at the corner of his lips. He had lost. Luo Ziyuan had lost. All of a sudden, the entire Yunmo banner fell silent. It should be known that Ling Han was only a 10 meridians, and still had a massive room for growth. Now that Luo Ziyuan had lost, it meant that for a very, very long time, it was impossible that there would be another meridian opening tier that could threaten Ling Han. In fact, it could be said that Ling Han was already invincible in meridian opening tier. As long as one didn't advance into blood transformation tier, there would be no one at the same cultivation level as him. How could they not feel such dejection as if they had lost their parents? On the other hand, the people from Shenqing Banner all roared in excitement. All of them looked as if they had been pumped full of adrenaline. This was really exalting. They had never felt so good before. Ling Han. Captain Ling. This seemed to have become the base camp of the Shenqing Banner. It was filled with the roars of the Shenqing Banner warriors. What are you shouting for? So noisy. The people from Yunmore Banner were already displeased, so they were naturally even more infuriated upon hearing this. Can't we? We're so happy. The people from Shenqing Banner were still excited, so how could they stop? Fuck. Someone couldn't bear it any longer, and threw out a rock. You dare to make a move? Beat him up. Boom. The situation immediately became irresolvable. At first, it was only a battle between a few people, but very quickly, it turned into a great battle royal. More than 100 people had gotten into a gang fight, and all of them were 10 meridians at least. When their power was released, they could easily injure others. The scene was really chaotic. Ling Han let out a battle cry. Group battles were his favorite activity. Stop. After at least 10 minutes, a voice filled with majesty and fury rang out. It was like thunder, causing everyone's ears to ring. Then, their blood boiled, as if their heads were about to explode. Instantly, everyone stopped. There were even some whose eyes were bleeding. A man leaped over from the distance. He looked to be in his 40s, and his expression was slightly sinister. He was wearing a tight-fitting white suit, and it could be seen that there was a blood-like aura boiling on his body. An elite of blood transformation tier. Greetings, Banner Lord. The people from Yunmore Banner all knelt down. Although the members of the Shenqing Banner didn't kneel, they all lowered their heads slightly. This was a necessary respect for elites. This was the Banner Lord of Yunmore Banner, Ji Xiuyu. Are you trying to rebel? Ji Xiuyu asked coldly. His voice wasn't loud, yet it was enough to make people feel discomfort in their chests. It was as if all the blood in their bodies were about to boil. Blood transformation tier elites were too strong. This was a kind of qualitative suppression. You actually dare to cause trouble in the base camp? You guys are really outrageously bold. He swept an eye over all of them. Shenqing Banner, what is going on with you guys? It's just a spar, so what need is there for Banner Lord Ji to make such a fuss? A gentle and melodious voice rang out, and Lian Shuarong's figure appeared as well. She was standing in front of Ji Xiuyu. Wrapped in tight-fitting attire, her figure was shapely and curvaceous. You call this sparring? Ji Xiuyu pointed at the crowd, and many people were bleeding and battered. If it's not sparring, then what is it? Lian Shuarong said coldly. She turned her head, and said to the people of Shenqing Banner, you guys have a lot of free time, right? Looks like I haven't drilled you guys hard enough. Scram back with me immediately, and in the next 10 days, your daily training will double. TSK, she was so protective of her own people. When such a huge matter was spoken from her mouth, it was like the two teams were just playing house. Hearing these words, the people from Shenqing Banner all looked bitter. Their training volume had doubled, they were going to have a hard time. Chapter 3160, 3160 Penalty. Chapter 3160, 3160 Penalty. 3160 Penalty. What are you standing around for? Get lost. Lian Shuarong said with a cold expression. The people of the Shenqing Banner hurriedly retreated. Lian Shuarong had absolute authority in their hearts. Ling Han followed behind. At this time, he had best not stand out. After returning to Shenqing Banner, not long after, Lian Shuarong returned. Her expression was cold, and she shouted harshly, all of you come here. All the team members walked out, all of them as obedient as children. How dare you all, to actually run over Yunmore Banner for a gang fight? Humph, why don't you all just go straight to the heavens then? Lian Shuarong rebuked coldly. No one spoke, all of them with their heads bowed. What is it? Now you know fear? Lian Shuarong said. She swept an eye over everyone, and the expression on her face gradually eased, as she continued, however, in the end, you have not embarrassed our Shenqing Banner. Of course, we can all fight. Everyone immediately became lively again. Banner Lord, we will definitely not embarrass you. All of us are fierce, every single one capable of fighting 10 people. However, after Lian Shuarong's pretty face stiffened, everyone fell silent again. In the Xianqing banner, she had absolute authority. Tell me, what exactly is going on? She asked. A deputy captain walked over and explained the whole story. Lian Shuarong looked towards Ling Han, a hint of surprise flickering in her eyes. She had not thought that Ling Han would actually be so powerful. Not only had he defeated Zhu Lang, he had even defeated Luo Ziyuan. What a freakish freak. Previously, she had appointed Ling Han as deputy captain, out of admiration for Ling Han's talent. It was also on a whim, and she had not thought too much about it, but this time, she was really stunned. This brat was worthy of focused nurturing. All right, all of you go out for training. By evening, if anyone still has the strength to stand, from tomorrow onwards, the training volume will increase tenfold. Lian Shuarong said coldly. Everyone was listless, and began to train. However, as they fought, ran, and jumped, a smile slowly appeared on everyone's faces. Then, they became more and more excited. Today was really too awesome. Ling Han, follow me, Lian Shuarong said again. Sigh, he couldn't escape. Ling Han could only follow Lian Shuarong and enter her commander's tent in the camp. You're very good at fighting, aren't you? Lian Shuarong asked with a faint smile. Ling Han didn't know what she meant, so he simply smiled, and said, not too bad, not too bad. In another month, there will be a martial arts tournament held in the city, and you will represent Xianqing banner in the tournament, Lian Shuarong said. Ling Han was surprised. There was actually no punishment, and he was only asked to participate in some martial arts tournament. He chuckled, then if I get first place, what kind of reward would there be? Lian Shuarong couldn't help but laugh in spite of herself. You don't even know who your opponents are, and you're already thinking of rewards. I have always been more confident, Ling Han said, slightly embarrassed. Lian Shuarong was speechless. After a while, she said, this is a gathering that is held every year in Huju City. Getting first place is more of an honor. However, it's not without rewards, but it's different every year, so I don't know either. However, among your opponents, there are a few freaks that are quite extraordinary. The one ranked number 1 also has the ability to battle an opponent with a cultivation level that is superior to him by 2 cultivation levels. Only now did Ling Han's expression change slightly. There was actually someone who could battle against an opponent with a cultivation level surpassing 2 cultivation levels. A strong fighting spirit rose up in him. He really wanted to fight with this person. Lian Shuarong saw the fighting spirit on his face, and couldn't help but think, what kind of battle maniac is this guy? After learning of this kind of opponent, not only does he not feel the slightest bit of pressure, his fighting spirit actually soared. She continued, this person is already at 12 meridians. It's said that he can now advance into blood transformation tier. It's completely because of this tournament that he didn't break through. A 12 meridians, and also possessed freakish abilities that could fight with a gap of 2 cultivation levels, so how was he supposed to defeat them? Could Ling Han reach 12 meridians in a month? No, this was possible. Are there any restrictions in this tournament? Ling Han asked. For example, can formations be used as support? Do you really think you are a formation master? Lian Shuarong shook her head and said, you can't use talisman weapons, nor can you use high-level god tools. However, you can use formations. After all, in that little bit of time spent on the tournament stage, what formations could you set up? Hence, if you really could put it out, that would be your skill, and it would have to be recognized. Ling Han nodded. In this way, he would have a chance of winning. Banner Lord, can I ask for leave to prepare for next month's competition? Ling Han asked. He wanted to spend more time on formations, and not waste time on drills. Lian Shuarong thought for a moment, then said, all right, but if you can't get into the top 4, I'll make you double the amount of training in the following month. All right, Ling Han nodded. She was really underestimating him too much. He was aiming for first place. He was just about to leave, when he turned around and asked, "How is Sect Master Sun?" "He's fine. He's currently recuperating, and should need around a month's time," Lian Shuarong said casually. Only then did Ling Han leave. He had already asked for leave here, so Ling Han didn't feel much pressure. He began to study formations earnestly. He persevered in cultivating his spiritual power with the divine intent disc every day, improving every day. This was just the beginning, so his improvement was very fast. 10 days later, he was already able to walk out of the labyrinth with the white dot on the divine intent disc. After succeeding, the divine intent disc continued to emit a white light, as if it was telling the people around him that someone here had completed the test for the divine intent disc. And as his spiritual power increased greatly, Ling Han finally managed to create that psychedelic formation. With a casual toss, 9 formation foundations were distributed around him. He then stimulated them with his mental energy, and instantly, the formation was activated. "Huan Shui," he called. "Young master, what's wrong ye? Where are you, young master?" Huan Shui entered the room. It was obvious that Ling Han was standing opposite her, but she overlooked him as if Ling Han wasn't there at all. Ling Han was surprised. This psychedelic formation also had an invisibility function. He walked out of the formation, yet gave Huan Shui a scare, and she patted her chest hard. With such a heavy smack, would her chest really not break? "You walk forwards," Ling Han said. Huan Shui walked in a daze. To say nothing of the fact that this was a room, even if it was really a mountain of blades and a sea of flames in front of her, she would still step in without hesitation. "Yi, young master, why can't I see clearly?" Inside the psychedelic formation, Huan Shui spread open her arms, as if she had entered an extremely dark environment alone. Nothing could be seen clearly. "It's fine," Ling Han said. He stepped forward to put away the formation foundations, and instantly, Huan Shui was out in the open again. "Young master, what happened just now?" Her face was filled with confusion. "A mere formation," Ling Han said. "Formation?" Huan Shui was still confused. Ling Han gave a simple explanation, and Huan Shui immediately gave an "oh." "So young master spends all his time fiddling with that whatever disc for the sake of cultivating formations. I've always wondered what's so interesting about that little white dot swaying here and there." "Yi." Ling Han looked at the little handmaiden, a hint of surprise on his face. Chapter 3161 Jealousy. Chapter 3161, 3161 Jealousy. 3161 Jealousy. "You can sense the white dot, and stimulate it?" Ling Han asked. "Yes." The little female attendant nodded, looking confused. Ling Han was surprised. This little handmaiden had actually developed spiritual power. "Yi, could it be that he had picked up a hidden gem? Take it." Ling Han tossed the divine intent disc over to Huan Shui. "I'll give you a mission. Move that white dot every day. When you can push it out of the circular plate one day, tell me." "Oh." Huan Shui nodded. She didn't know why Ling Han wanted her to do this, but since it was young master's command, she naturally could only obey. Ling Han smiled. Who knows, he might be able to nurture a little female attendant that was skilled in martial arts, alchemy, and formations. In that case, who knew how many people would be scared to death? Let's go and take a look at there's a formations shop. Since I want to refine formations, there should be suitable formation foundations and materials for sale there. Additionally, I should get another book on formations, and the best would be one on killing formations. He went out and headed towards there's a formations shop. In the city, at the Flower Blossom Pavilion. This was the highest grade entertainment venue in the city, a famous establishment for money squandering. It was said that if one entered through this door, it was impossible to leave without spending more than 1,000 Dark North coins. And in the most expensive private room of the Flower Blossom Pavilion, the Emperor's Pavilion, 3 young people were drinking. Each of them had a beautiful woman by their side. These women were all astonishingly beautiful, and could sing and dance well. "Hey, I say, young Master Jun, haven't you gone to the Shenqing Banner to look for that banner lord recently?" the yellow-robed young man asked. The beautiful woman beside him was feeding him wine. Don't talk about it. The man called young Master Jun shook his head. He was tall and sturdy, and his face was also very handsome. However, there was an air of arrogance between his brows, which made him appear overbearing and arrogant. What is it? The other green-robed young man asked. Young Master Jun shook his head and said, I've been locked up by Master for the past 2 months, and he insisted that I master a formation before I could come out. Hearing these words, the other 2 young men looked envious. Young Master Jun, you really know how to show off. If I also had the talent to learn formations, I would have pounced on it long ago, the yellow-robed young man said. However, I heard that a great event happened in the Shenqing Banner recently, the young man in green said slowly. What is it? Young Master Jun asked. Shenqing Banner and Yunmore Banner got into a gang fight, the young man in green said. Really? The yellow-robed young man asked first, his expression filled with interest. Tell me, what is going on? The green-robed young man said, I heard that a prodigy cultivator has appeared in Shenqing Banner. Not only did he defeat Zhu Lang, but he even went to Yunmore Banner to issue a challenge. In the end, it is said that because his attitude was bad, it led to a battle royal. TSK, he can even defeat Zhu Lang? The yellow-robed young man was surprised. Amongst 10 meridians, that brat's strength can be considered top-notch. It is only just among 10 meridians. Young Master Jun took a sip of wine and said disdainfully, That's right. He is but a mere martial artist, how could he possibly compare to young Master Jun, an elementary-level formation master like you? The green-robed young man smiled, then paused. However, I heard that even the Banner Lord is extremely protective of this subordinate of hers. Not only did she not reprimand or punish him, she was instead worried that he would be injured, and had him take a long leave. Pa! A crisp sound rang out, and the glass cup in young Master Jun's hand had already been shattered. The shards stabbed into his hand, but because the skin of a cultivator was tough, they were unable to pierce through his skin. Really? He looked towards the green-robed young man, his eyes filled with killing intent. The young man in green nodded, Of course it's real. You could just ask anyone from Shenqing Banner. Young Master Jun could no longer be bothered to drink. He pushed the beauty in his arms aside, and strode off. Lian Shuarong was the exclusive property that he had his eye on for a long time, and now someone actually dared to compete with him, whether that brat was doing it intentionally or unintentionally. Even if it was just Lian Shuarong having one-sided feelings for him, that was not allowed. I say, Zhujian, is it really good for you to deliberately provoke him like this? The yellow-robed young man asked. The green-robed young man, Zhujian, chuckled and said, That brat called Ling Han has extraordinary abilities. With him around, I don't have the confidence to enter the top 4 in next month's tournament. Good one, Zhujian, how despicable. The yellow-robed young man sighed with emotion. With Yang Jun's petty nature, he would definitely keep an eye on that brat. 1 month's time would be enough for him to torment that brat half to death, and by then, you would have one less competitor. Zhujian broke into a smile, looking very bright. Who would have thought that he would have so easily incited a battle just now? On the other hand, when Yang Jun went to Shenqing Banner to ask, it was indeed as Zhujian had said. Ling Han had led the way to cause trouble, but in the end, he did not receive any punishment. Captain Ling is really good, showing off our might and venting our anger. In the whole world, aside from our Banner Lord, I only submit to Captain Ling. Does Banner Lord Lian treat Captain Ling well? That's for sure. They're a perfect match. I heard that on the way here, Captain Ling was even cradling the things that our Banner Lord gave him without eating, drinking, or even sleeping. It can be seen that he's infatuated, right? There were some things that Yang Jun had found out himself, and there were some that he had sent someone to find out. The information that came back to him made him furious. There was really someone who dared to have designs on his woman? This was intolerable. He wanted to immediately find Ling Han, but because Ling Han wasn't in Shenqing Banner, and not many people knew where Ling Han lived, he could only temporarily suppress the urge to make trouble with Ling Han. However, Lian Shuarong had specially arranged accommodations for Ling Han in the city. Humph, are you hiding a beauty in your golden house? This Ling Han, in the end, would still have to return to the barracks, and by then, a humph. Ling Han walked all the way to there's a formations shop, then walked in. It was still that old man, and he still looked indifferent. How was he supposed to do business like this? Old man, is your shop selling the ingredients for the formation foundations? Ling Han asked. En. Niu Huaching raised his head and glanced at Ling Han. You are going to create formation foundations? That's right, Ling Han replied. Niu Huaching thought for a moment, then took out a circular plate from the drawer and placed it on the top of the drawer. Test your spiritual power, so I can make sure you don't waste my ingredients. This was a divine intent disc. Without developing spiritual power, taking formation materials would only be a waste. Ling Han nodded, all right. He picked up the divine intent disc and activated it with his mental power. This white dot could only be seen, or rather sensed, by those who possessed spiritual power. That was because even if Ling Han closed his eyes, he could still clearly sense its existence. After only a short while, the divine intent disc emitted a white light. Yi. This time, Niu Huaching was slightly moved. I never thought that the strength of your mental power has already reached the elementary level, brat. What elementary level? Ling Han wore a confused expression. I am really playing the lute to a cow. Niu Huaching shook his head and explained, according to the difference in strength of spiritual power can be divided into 4 levels. The lowest level is elementary level, then middle level, then high level, and finally, grandmaster level. Chapter 3162 Running Errands. Chapter 3162, 3162 Running Errands. 3162 Running Errands. Elementary level. Was this considered a high or low level? Niu Huaching's interest was piqued, and he asked, Brat, when did you start cultivating spiritual power? When? It should have been more than a month ago. Ling Han told him the truth, and when Niu Huaching heard this, he instantly revealed a shocked expression. It had only been a month. A little more than a month. Are you sure? The old geezer emphasized. Ling Han turned around to look at the old geezer. The two of them were completely unrelated, so was there any need for him to deceive the boss of a formations shop? Looking at how laid back you are, just how much business would there be in the shop? Would you be able to cheat me out of my money? Niu Huaching, on the other hand, broke into a smile. He continued, have you studied the formation that I gave you previously? Ling Han nodded, that's why I want to buy the ingredients for the formation foundations. Niu Huaching shook his head and said, you really don't know how expensive things are. The materials used for formation foundations are expensive, and it would be too much of a waste for you to use them to practice. Ling Han smiled. As it turned out, the old geezer was also thinking for the sake of his wallet. He said, don't worry about that. I've already practiced it. Yi, you have even succeeded in practicing it. Niu Huaching was surprised. Where is it engraved? Have you brought it? Ling Han shook his head. How could he possibly bring it with him? Bring it here, let this old man see. If you really succeed, the ingredients in this old man's shop are freely available for you to choose from. I'll give them for free, Niu Huaching said. Ling Han was surprised. Why did this old geezer have to go so far? Did he have a lot of money to burn? Go and get it. Niu Huaching waved his hand dismissively. If you don't get it, nothing here will be sold to you. Fuck, you are really willful. Ling Han had no choice but to go back and bring over the formation foundations that he had created. Niu Huaching took it over and examined it carefully. He even stroked it with his hand. His expression was one of intoxication, as if it was his lover. Ling Han got goosebumps just looking at him. Not bad, truly not bad. He revealed a smile. In just a few short days, you can combine the patterns of formations and draw them into shape. You can be considered a genius of formations. At first, he had wanted to say prodigy, but after thinking about it, he couldn't praise him too much, lest Ling Han become too proud. I'm a man of my word. You can choose any of the ingredients in this shop, Niu Huaching said. However, if you want to refine this kind of elementary level illusion formation, you don't have to use high-grade ingredients. This kind of iron-heart magnet is enough. The old geezer retrieved a pile of black rocks of varying sizes. They didn't look attractive at all. Seeing Ling Han's expression of disgust, the old geezer laughed loudly, and said, "Brat, you don't understand. The more natural this thing is, the more it is one with the heaven and earth and nature. If you throw it onto the ground, can you tell what difference it has with a piece of mud? There really wasn't any. This was like a piece of coal. This is the formation patterns blade, which can be easily used to inscribe formation patterns." Niu Huiqing took out a small dagger with a very long handle, and handed it over to Ling Han. "Come, create it on the spot. I want to see it with my own eyes." Ling Han didn't mind. The old geezer had gifted him the formation manual, and now the materials and tools were the same. He had nothing to keep secret from the old man. In any case, he was going to create formation foundations, so what did it matter where he created them? All right. He took the dagger, and picked up a black stone. Needless to say, this thing was very heavy. The moment he touched it, he actually felt its weight. From this, it could be seen that the old geezer really hadn't used ordinary rocks to trick him. Ling Han's expression became serious, and he began to carve formation patterns. Whether it was practicing with the divine intent disc or creating formation foundations, it was a way to temper one's spiritual power. It was very simple. Just like muscles, they would naturally improve when they were exhausted. In a short while, he had created the first formation foundation. Niu Huiqing immediately took it over and examined it closely. A smile appeared on his face, and he said, "Although this is your first time creating it, so your technique is a little rusty and the marks are very strong, it's still your first time creating it. It's truly amazing to have such a performance." He waited quietly for Ling Han to create all 9 formation foundations, then said, "Set up the formation foundations." Ling Han nodded, and laid out the formation foundations. There was a need for care. The distance and angle between each formation foundation and the other formation foundation was extremely strict. Otherwise, it would affect the extraction and manipulation of the power of heaven and earth. After the formation was set up, Ling Han activated them with his spiritual power. These were formations that he had created himself. His spiritual power was connected, and the formation immediately channeled. "All right, try striking the formations with your palm," Niu Huiqing said from the sidelines. Ling Han followed his instructions and shot out a punch. He didn't use much force, but it was still a few thousand kilograms. However, even if he released his power which touched the formation foundations, these 9 black rocks didn't move at all. Yi! Ling Han increased his power, but the formation foundations still didn't move at all. Only when he increased his power to 25,000 kilograms did the formation foundations finally move. However, the strange thing was that when one piece moved, the other 8 pieces would also move at the same time. Whether it was in terms of distance or angle, they were all exactly the same. It was equivalent to moving the entire formation a certain distance towards a certain direction. This is interesting. How can it be that the formations won't be damaged under the weight of power? Instead, they can only move. In this way, it undoubtedly made formations even more practical. Otherwise, as long as one had 25,000 kilograms of strength, he would be able to damage the formations even with just a careless strike. "Pa, pa, pa." Niu Huiqing clapped his hands, and said, "Brat, not bad at all." Ling Han smiled, and said, "Uncle, this time, I want to learn a formation technique that mainly focuses on killing, or the kind that can equalize the cultivation levels of both sides." Niu Huiqing rolled his eyes, and said, "To equalize the cultivation level of both sides, that is a Grandmaster level formation. In the entire Dark North Nation, there are no more than 3 people that have the ability to create it. Could you be any greedier, brat? Moreover, there are too many formation patterns that formations like this have that need to be inscribed, and the formation foundations needed are in the hundreds. It belongs to the category of large-scale formations. Brat, could it be that you want to carry it with you and use it to level out your cultivation level so you could battle with others?" Had he been seen through? Ling Han sighed. Was it really that obvious on his face? "Here, this is a killing formation. It poses a considerable threat to even blood transformation tier elites. However, if you want to set it up successfully, you would at least have to develop middle-level spiritual power. But when Niu Huiqing saw that Ling Han was about to take over the formation, he withdrew his hand. However, you have to run an errand for this old man. Run where? Ling Han asked. Go to the Formations Association and find a brat called Jiyu Tianhe. Tell him that I was the one who sent you, Niu Huiqing said. Ling Han gritted his teeth and said, just say that you were the one who sent me over. There is no need to say what for. When that brat knows that I was the one who sent you over, he naturally knows, Niu Huiqing said with a smile. Ling Han kept feeling that the old geezer's smile was very strange, as if he had schemed against him. However, what bad things could happen if he made a trip to the Formations Association? All right, I'll go. Ling Han nodded. Go on, Niu Huiqing said with a nod. He then tossed the book on formations over. Ling Han caught it, and couldn't help but feel surprised. Uncle, aren't you afraid that I'll go back on my word? Would you? Niu Huiqing asked in reply. No. Ling Han shook his head. Then it's settled, Niu Huiqing said boldly and confidently, looking at him like he was an idiot. Fuck. Chapter 3163, 3163 Blocking the Doorway. Chapter 3163, 3163 Blocking the Doorway. 3163 Blocking the Doorway. Ling Han put away the newly refined formation foundations, and left the old one in the shop. Niu Huiqing said that he wanted to take a look. In any case, it was made of wood, and was already slightly damaged, because stimulating the power of heaven and earth itself was a massive pressure, so how could ordinary wood possibly bear it? He had always been a man of his word. Thus, after leaving the formations shop, he walked towards the Formations Association. It didn't matter if he didn't know the way. He could just ask anyone, as the Formations Association was quite well known. There were locomotives in the city that they could ride, although their speed was not as fast as when Ling Han was sprinting at full speed. Firstly, Ling Han was not in a rush, and secondly, there was no need for him to exert himself either, so why not take a ride? Traveling by carriage to the Formations Association required 2 Dark North coins, which wasn't cheap. After Ling Han paid, he climbed down from the car and looked ahead. In front of him was the Formations Association. This was a massive building. First, there was a flight of stairs, which was as tall as 2 floors. Then, there was a white-colored hall, which was supported by massive pillars, making for a very grand sight. There was practically no one entering or leaving this place. If it was not for the fact that there were 4 guards standing at the top of the steps, one would really wonder if this was a haunted house. Ling Han ascended the stairs, and very soon, he had finished his journey. However, he was also stopped by those 4 people. Who are you? What business do you have here? One of them asked, appearing to cherish his words like they were gold. Ling Han smiled, and said, My name is Ling Han, and I have come here to find a person called Jiyu Tianhe. There is this person, right? Yes, how could there not be? That person was the boss of this place. The 4 guards exchanged looks. Had you taken the wrong medicine, brat? Coming here to ask if there was a person called Chairperson Jiyu here. Hehe, you want to see our chairperson? One of the guards asked, chuckling. What? Jiyu Tianhe was actually the chairperson of the Formations Association? Ling Han gritted his teeth. Could it be that he had been tricked by that old geezer? He actually called Jiyu Tianhe a brat, making him think that he was a minor character in the Formations Association. However, he was entrusted with a task, and being loyal, he continued, Please report this to Chairperson Jiyu, and tell him that I was sent by the boss of There's a Formations shop. Pu. The 4 guards almost spluttered in laughter. How many formations shops were there in the city? Which one had sent you here? You can't even speak properly, and yet you still want to see the chairperson? Ling Han felt more and more like he had been screwed over by the old geezer. Wouldn't giving the shop such a strange name deliberately cause misunderstanding? That formation shop is called There's a Formations shop, he said. I'll have to trouble the 4 of you to pass on the message. Whether Chairperson Jiyu will meet me or not, It is up to him. I am not asking for too much. He had only come to help Niu Huaching. Now that he had arrived and the message had been passed on, his mission was completed. As for the rest, he didn't care. Apologies, Chairperson Gu is busy with many matters, and we dare not disturb him, the 4 guards all said thus. What a joke. If everyone wanted to see Chairperson Gu, and they all went to make a report, then wouldn't Chairperson Gu be pestered to death? How would he still have the time to study formations? Please leave. They wanted to chase Ling Han away. If these 4 people had gone to relay the message, and Jiu Tianhe did not want to meet him, then Ling Han would not have continued to pester them. Instead, he would directly turn around and leave. However, since they did not proceed to report, then Ling Han felt like he had not completed his mission. Thus, he argued strongly, asking the 4 of them to make an exception. No matter what, he had to deliver the message. What's the matter? Why are you making so much noise here? A young man walked out of the great hall. He was dressed all in white, and had an elegant bearing. Young Master Jun. The 4 guards hurriedly paid their respects, their expressions incredibly respectful. This was Yang Jun, young Master Jun. His natural talent in formations was incredibly outstanding, and he was acclaimed as a formations prodigy that would only appear once every 10 years. He was taken as disciple by attendant Liu, and had already become an elementary-level formation master in his early 20s. A formation master. Having the title of master was already something. There was another young man by Yang Jun's side. His name was Yang Ziqing, and he was a young master of the Yang clan, a preeminent clan in the city. He had deliberately come to find Yang Jun to ask him to create a formation for him. This is the Formations Association after all, not a marketplace. Yang Ziqing said in a haughty tone. Really, did they think that just about anyone was qualified to enter here? Wouldn't that lower his status as well? Ling Han looked towards Yang Ziqing. Though the 4 guards had been rejecting him previously, at least their attitude wasn't too bad. Thus, he did not get angry, but Yang Ziqing's attitude made him extremely displeased. What do you think you are? He retorted directly. You dare insult me? Yang Ziqing was furious. Oh, so you're not a thing then? Ling Han asked with a smile. Be at starred. Yang Ziqing stomped his feet, angered by Ling Han's words. Young Master Jun, it's like this, one of the guards explained. This person's name is Ling Han, and he requests an audience with the chairperson. Ling Han. Yang Jun felt a jolt in his mind. He didn't hear anything that the guard said after that. This person was Ling Han. He looked at Ling Han, and asked, Are you Ling Han of Shenqing Banner? Yi, this guy knew him. That's right. Ling Han nodded. Yang Junjun instantly revealed a menacing killing intent. This brat actually dared to snatch his woman. Most importantly, he had been pursuing Lian Shuarong for 1 or 2 years, but Lian Shuarong had always treated him coldly. But now, Lian Shuarong not only gifted things to Ling Han, but also publicly covered for him. Fuck. Yang Ziqing was observant, and immediately said, Brat, this is not a place for you to behave atrociously. If you still don't get lost, I will not be polite to you. Ling Han glanced at him. You still want to use force? We're not going to use force. We're just here to maintain order, Yang Ziqing said coldly. Seeing that Yang Ziqing had taken the initiative to jump out, Yang Jun did not speak further. He wanted to kill Ling Han, but no matter how courageous he was, he would not dare to commit murder in public in the city. The nation had its laws. If the other party was not a wanted criminal, then incapacitating or causing even death to the other, one would also have to pay a huge price for it as well. Thus, if Yang Ziqing jumped out now, he would also be happy to have him take the vanguard, and teach Ling Han a lesson. Of course, he would definitely think of a way to kill Ling Han later. He could not tolerate having another man in the heart of the woman he loved. Scram. Yang Ziqing made a move, and delivered a slap at Ling Han. He was an 11 meridians. The power of this attack was profound, and the strong wind generated caused the 4 guards to tremble, almost tripping over. Anger appeared on Ling Han's face. Who had he offended? He could tell that Yang Jun had a strong animosity towards him, and this young Zicheng was bootlicking him, so he hurriedly jumped out. Did he think he was an easy target to bully? Ling Han also delivered a slap. The force that young Zicheng had delivered was instantly disintegrated, and the power of Ling Han's strike did not decrease, and landed heavily on young Zicheng's face. Young Zicheng released a pained groan, and a red palm print instantly appeared on his face. He was stupefied. He was an 11 meridians, and only a 12 meridians could slap him as they pleased. This guy looked so young, but was actually an elite of 12 meridians. He really could not believe it. Otherwise, he would not have been in such a haste to make his move. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.